Chapter 2075. Seeing these drops of essence blood, Chu Fengmian's eyes revealed a trace of a smile. It was no wonder that 9 sons, Emperor Wu and Yi Wuchang, wanted to run away when they realized that their 2 incarnations were not Chu Fengmian's match. Those 2 incarnations had consumed their blood essences to condense. Whether it was a warrior or a demon god, blood essence was the source of power. Losing a drop of blood essence would mean losing the strength of the body. Now that the 2 incarnations had been destroyed by Chu Fengmian, although it was not a serious injury to 9 sons, Emperor Wu and Yi Wuchang, their decades of hard work had been destroyed. For Chu Fengmian, the blood essence of 2 celestial realm experts who had cultivated for decades was of little use. But for ordinary half-step celestial realm martial artists and demon gods, it was a rare treasure. Chu Fengmian used the sky-devouring secret technique to remove all the impurities in these drops of blood essence. Soon, there were only 2 elixirs the size of a longan left in the sky-devouring secret technique. Chu Fengmian condensed the blood essence of 9 sons Emperor Wu and Yi Wuchang into 2 blood elixirs. Seeing that Chu Fengmian was the only one left in the sky, countless disciples of the Sword Dao sect were still in a state of shock. They did not come to their senses for a long time. These were 2 celestial realm experts. Although it was only one of their incarnations, everyone could clearly feel the strength of this incarnation. The power of these 2 incarnations was much stronger than that of ordinary half-step celestial realm warriors or demon gods. But now, they were all killed by Chu Fengmian so easily with a single move. Even those who knew Chu Fengmian, such as Qing Ming, Yin Hanshi, Emperor Yin, and even Hanuel Li and Luo Shi, were stunned. Chu Fengmian had left the 9 realms and returned. His current strength had reached an unimaginable level. Even the incarnations of celestial realm experts could be easily killed. Did that mean that Chu Fengmian's strength had at least reached the celestial realm? Such a young celestial realm expert. In the entire 9 regions, the celestial realm experts were some old antiques. There had never been a celestial realm expert as young as Chu Fengmian. With such strength at such a young age, Chu Fengmian's future achievements would be unimaginable. Moreover, Chu Fengmian was the sect master of the Sword Dao sect. The more monstrous Chu Fengmian was, the happier the disciples of the Sword Dao sect would be. The sect would be stronger in the future. Sect Master, we welcome back. Welcome back, Sect Master. The disciples of the Sword Dao sect below suddenly roared. All of them knelt down and looked at Chu Fengmian in the sky. Their gazes were filled with incomparable admiration. After this battle, Chu Fengmian's invincible image in the hearts of all the disciples of the Sword Dao sect was even more stable. The haze in the hearts of all the Sword Dao sect disciples was swept away. Although the threat of the 5 great sects was still there, in the hearts of the Sword Dao sect's disciples, as long as Chu Fengmian existed, these threats were nothing. Let's go and rest. Chu Fengmian glanced at the disciples of the Sword Dao sect. The current Sword Dao sect was completely different from when it was first established. There were many disciples in the Emperor realm and Emperor Gu realm. The Sword Dao sect established by Chu Fengmian was open to all the disciples in the 9 regions. Some of them were not from the Northern Territory, but they had heard of Chu Fengmian's legend. They had all traveled thousands of miles to join the Sword Dao sect. The Sword Dao sect only needed time to continue to develop. One day, it would become the 8th sect in the 9 regions. Yes, hearing Chu Fengmian's words, all the disciples of the Sword Dao sect left to rest. The disciples of the Sword Dao sect were exhausted because of the war with the 5 great sects in the past 3 days. Now, they needed to rest. Now, all the disciples of the 5 great sects in the Northern Territory had been killed by Chu Fengmian before he came to the Sword Origin world. There would be no more waves in the near future. Let's go back to the main hall. Chu Fengmian took a step forward and walked into the main hall. The main hall of the Sword Dao sect was Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace. Young Master's strength is really amazing. As soon as Chu Fengmian stepped into the main hall, an old man appeared. It was Old Yun. Old Yun looked at Chu Fengmian in amazement. He had seen Chu Fengmian's attack from the outside. The first time he saw Chu Fengmian in the returning ruins heaven, he was only in the life and death realm. He could barely contend with the first step of the life and death steps. But in just a year, Chu Fumian had grown to such an amazing level. He could even kill a celestial realm clone easily. Old Yin had witnessed the peak and decline of Cloud, Feather Heavenly Palace, but it was the first time he had seen a genius like Chu Fumian. Even in Cloud, Feather Heavenly Palace, which had dominated the 9 regions for an era, there had never been a genius like Chu Fumian. "Thank you for your hard work, Old Yin." Chu Fumian looked at Old Yin and said with a smile. Chu Fumian was the sect master of Sword Dao sect in name, but in fact the various matters of Sword Dao sect were handled by Han Yueli, Luo, Shi, Old Yin, Sword Slayer Monarch, and the others. Elder Yin also contributed greatly to the management of the Sword Dao sect. It's an honor for these old bones of mine to be able to contribute to the young master, Old Yin said with a smile. As the spirit of Cloud, Feather Heavenly Palace, Old Yin wasn't good at fighting, but he had lived for countless years and witnessed the peak of Cloud, Feather Heavenly Palace. In terms of managing the sect and nurturing the disciples, Old Yin was more proficient than the others in Sword Dao sect. Therefore, Old Yin was now in charge of managing the sect and nurturing the disciples. Seeing the disciples of Sword Dao sect become stronger and stronger, his heart was incomparably gratified. It was as if he was watching the decline of Cloud, Feather Heavenly Palace rise bit by bit. Although the Cloud Feather Palace had already perished, the inheritance of the Cloud Feather Palace had been passed down by the Swordway sect. Therefore, Old Yin was willing to nurture the disciples of Sword Dao sect and pass down the inheritance of Cloud, Feather Heavenly Palace. Everyone is here. Not long after Chu Fumian stepped into the main hall, several figures flew into the main hall. These figures were all familiar to Chu Fumian. Han Yueli, Luo Shi, Qing Ming, Mad Dragon Emperor, Princess of the Sea, Yin Hanshi, Emperor Yin, Luo He, Sword Slayer Monarch. Everyone entered the main hall and took their seats. As for Chu Fumian, he sat on the highest throne in the main hall. First, he set a small goal, such as 1 second. Remember, book guest residence. Chapter 2076. Only the sect master of the Sword Dao sect was qualified to sit on the throne at the top of the hall. Since sect master is back, how are we going to deal with the 5 major sects? The 5 major sects suddenly joined forces to attack the Sword Dao sect and caused great losses to our disciples. We can't let them go easily. Lord Slayer was the first to speak and asked Chu Fumian. Han Yueli was the one who had the power to decide the affairs of the Sword Dao sect when Chu Fumian was not around. Now that Chu Fumian was back, he had the final say on how to deal with the 5 major sections. Moreover, Chu Fumian had just returned and displayed such heaven-defying strength. Chu Fumian was undoubtedly the strongest person in the Sword Dao sect. It's up to you to decide. Han Yueli also looked at Chu Fumian and said softly, "Yes." Chu Fumian nodded, and his eyes were filled with boundless killing intent. The 5 major sects dared to attack the Sword Dao sect. That's a dead end. There's no other way. Although Chu Fumian's tone was calm, it contained supreme majesty. It was like a judgment between heaven and earth, announcing the death of the 5 major sections. Young master, are we going to have a decisive battle with the 5 major sects 3 days later? The Mad Dragon Emperor also spoke up. Chu Fumian had killed the 9 sons Emperor Wu, the incarnation of Yi Wuchang. This hatred was irreconcilable. If the 9 sons, Emperor Wu and Yi Wuchang, could tolerate this hatred, they wouldn't be worthy of being called Heavenly Realm experts. 3 days later, the 5 major sects would definitely attack the Sword Dao sect and launch a decisive battle. If there was a decisive battle, not only Chu Fumian, but the entire Sword Dao sect would have to be prepared in advance. There's no need for 3 days. Tomorrow, I'll go and destroy the 5 major sections. Chu Fumian said indifferently. What? Tomorrow? Hearing Chu Fumian's words, the people below were extremely shocked. They thought that Chu Fumian was going to prepare for a decisive battle with the 5 major sects 3 days later. But now, according to Chu Fumian's words, Chu Fumian actually wanted to take the initiative to attack? That's right. Tomorrow, I'll head to the headquarters of the top 5 sects and kill every single one of their disciples. Chu Fengmian said calmly. Judging from Chu Fengmian's tone, it was as if he was doing something trivial. When the people below heard his tone, their expressions turned a little strange. Each of the 5 major sects was a force that ruled over a galaxy, and there were celestial realm old ancestors among them. However, from Chu Fengmian's tone, it seemed that the 5 major sects were forces that could be crushed at any time. But now, no matter how big Chu Fengmian's tone was, no one was absolutely sure that Chu Fengmian was bragging. The strength that Chu Fengmian displayed could be said to be invincible. He could easily kill the incarnation of a celestial realm expert. Even an ordinary celestial realm expert would find it difficult to do so. Previously, Chu Fengmian had killed the incarnations of 2 heaven realm experts with a single move. Among those present, only the Mad Dragon Emperor knew the strength that Chu Fengmian had just displayed. His strength had definitely surpassed the immortal realm or even the immortal warrior realm. With such strength, it would be easy for him to sweep through the 5 major sects. But Sect Master, the lairs of the 5 major sects are said to be hidden in a small world of the 9 regions. It's illusory. I've been investigating for a long time, but I still can't find the exact location of the lairs of the 5 major sects. The Sword Slayer King stood up and said. He was in charge of investigating the situation of the 5 major sects, but he couldn't find the exact location of the lairs of the 5 major sects. He only knew that the lairs of the 5 major sects should be in a small world of the 9 regions. However, there were thousands of small worlds around the 9 regions. Trying to find the lairs of the 5 major sects from these thousands of small worlds was like looking for a needle in a haystack. It's okay. I already know the location of the lairs of the 5 major sects, Chu Fengmian said calmly. When he had just killed the incarnations of 9 sons, Emperor Wu and Yi Wuchang, he had already seized a wisp of aura from them. With this wisp of aura and Chu Fengmian's understanding of the Space Tao, it wasn't difficult for him to find the lairs of the 5 major sects. Let's stop talking about the 5 major sects here. This time, when I return from the Shanghai Star region, I receive an important piece of news. You'd better be prepared, Chu Fengmian suddenly said with a serious face. Seeing that Chu Fengmian's face had turned grave, the faces of everyone in the hall also turned grave. They knew that the important news that Chu Fengmian was talking about was definitely earth-shattering. Everyone listened quietly, waiting for Chu Fengmian to continue speaking. Do you know about the Tianjiu domain? Chu Fengmian suddenly said. Tianjiu domain? No. Judging from the name, it seems to be related to the 9 regions. Isn't this the mysterious world behind the 9 regions? Isn't this an ancient myth? Everyone's reaction was different. For example, Yin Hanshi, Emperor Yin, and the others knew nothing about the Tianjiu domain. However, Sword-Slaying King, Luo He, and the others who were born in the 9 regions had heard of the Tianjiu domain. However, the Tianjiu domain's appearance in the 9 regions was only a myth. There weren't many people who took the Tianjiu domain seriously. Chu Fengmian used to think so too, until Jianling told Chu Fengmian about the existence of the Tianjiu domain. Chu Fengmian believed that the Tianjiu domain really existed. The Tianjiu domain really exists. At the same time, the upheaval of the 9 regions this time is the prelude to the birth of the Tianjiu domain. Chu Fengmian said, What? The Tianjiu domain really exists. It's about to be born? Chu Fengmian's words were undoubtedly like thunder, resounding in everyone's heart. In countless people's hearts, the Tianjiu domain was a myth. But now, Chu Fengmian suddenly told them that the myth was true. Even a mythical Tianjiu domain was about to be born and appear in front of them. If the Tianjiu domain really comes out, it'll undoubtedly be a disaster for our Sword Dao sect. Sword-Slaying King thought for a while and said with a pale face. According to the rumor, the Tianjiu domain was a sacred place full of experts. According to the rumor, the Tianjiu domain was full of heavenly human realm experts. There were even Xian heaven realm and heavenly realm experts in the Tianjiu domain. If the Tianjiu domain really came out, the first one to suffer would be the Sword Dao sect, because the Sword Dao sect was the archenemy of the 7 major sections. According to the rumor, The 7 major sects were backed by the Tianzhou domain. First, set a small target, such as 1 second. Remember, book residence. Chapter 2077. Once Tianzhou territories appeared, the 7 great sects would definitely deal with the Sword Dao sect. That's right. If Tianzhou territories appeared, it would be a disaster for the Sword Dao sect. Chu Fengmian nodded and said solemnly. Chu Fengmian had heard from Jianling that the Sword Path Master had perished because he had been surrounded and killed by the powerhouses of the 9 celestial domains. Tianzhou territories spent a lot of effort to deal with the Sword Dao sect and kill the Master of Sword Dao. The Sword Dao sect that Chu Fengmian established was far less powerful than the Sword Dao sect in the past. It was strong enough to fight against the 7 great sects, but it was still too weak to fight against Tianzhou territories, which was stronger than the 3 great sacred regions. If Chu Fengmian didn't come back this time, the Sword Dao sect wouldn't be able to fight against the alliance of the 5 great sections. However, when Chu Fengmian returned to the Sword Path sect from the vast Sea Star system, he did intend to increase the strength of the Sword Path sect. Once the Sword Dao sect became strong, it would be able to deal with crises even if Chu Fengmian wasn't around. Sword Slayer King, I'll leave these saint pills to you. You'll be responsible for distributing them to the disciples. Chu Fengmian suddenly waved his hand, and thousands of saint elixir pills flew out of his palm. These divine elixir pills were obtained by Chu Fengmian from the palace at the Sacrificial Lake and the Dark Whale's secret treasure. They were all divine elixir pills of the antiquity level. Saint pills of this grade weren't very useful to Chu Fengmian now. However, for Emperor Realm Masters and even Emperor Gu Realm Monster Gods, an ancient grade saint pill was invaluable. It could help them break through to the next realm. If these thousands of ancient grade saint pills were used well, they could help the Sword Dao sect cultivate thousands of Emperor Gu Realm Masters. So many saint pills? Sword Slayer King, Qing Ming, Emperor Yin, and everyone in the hall were stunned when they saw Chu Fengmian waving his hand and a small mountain of saint pills appeared. These were all ancient grade saint pills. Even a single primordial sacred elixir was a priceless item. However, Chu Fengmian was able to take out thousands of them in one go. Qing Ming, the Yin Emperor, knew that even the treasury of the Holy Dragon Mystery Plane, one of the 4 great forces of the Daluo star field, did not have so many divine elixir pills. It was as if Chu Fengmian had emptied a treasury. However, Chu Fengmian had actually plundered the sacrificial lake of the Poseidon sect on his way to the vast sea star system. After that, he went to the Black Whale hidden treasure trove and obtained a large amount of treasures. Chu Fengmian's harvest was indeed no less than emptying a treasury. It wasn't just the divine elixir pills. Soon, Chu Fengmian waved his hand and a series of spiritual weapons appeared in front of him. Countless materials and strange objects floated in front of Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian had killed many powerful beings in the Songhai star zone, including those in the celestial realm. The empty ring of each celestial realm expert was no less than a treasury. Chu Fengmian had obtained a large amount of spiritual weapons, materials, and so on. Chu Fengmian had no use for these things, so they could be used to nurture the Sword Principle sect. Distribute these disciples to the other disciples. Lord Slayer, you have to raise the strength of the disciples as soon as possible so that they can deal with the future crisis. Chu Fengmian looked at Lord Slayer and instructed. Lord Slayer's strength was not among the top of the Sword Principle sect's upper echelon, but he was the most loyal one. Chu Fengmian was very relieved to leave this matter to him. Yes, I will follow the sect master's orders. Lord Slayer took out an empty ring and stored the spiritual weapons, divine elixir pills, materials, and so on. And these are all for you. After taking out these things, Chu Fengmian opened the empty ring and many more spiritual weapons, divine elixir pills, materials, and so on flew out. However, the quality of these spiritual weapons, divine elixir pills, and materials were better than the ones given to Lord Slayer. These spiritual weapons, divine elixir pills, and materials were treasures that were of great use to half-step celestial realm martial artists and demon gods. Any of these items could attract countless Nine Tribulations, Emperor Gu, and even half-step celestial realm martial artists and demon gods to fight for them. The people in the hall were the upper echelons of the Sword Principle sect and the pillars of the Sword Principle sect. They could only lead the Sword Principle sect better if they were stronger. Chu Fengmian was well aware of the reason for the destruction of the Sword Principle sect. Although the Sword Principle sect was strong in the past, it was only supported by the Master of Sword Principle alone. Later, the Master of Sword Principle was besieged by Tianjiu regions and died, which led to the destruction of the Sword Principle sect. Even during the annihilation of the Sword Principle sect, the experts of Tianjiu regions did not intervene. The experts of the 7 major sects alone were enough to destroy the Sword Principle sect. A sect could never be supported by a single person. Chu Fengmian knew this very well. Although the Sword Principle sect was able to establish itself under his protection, with the growth of the Sword Principle sect, there would be a day when the Sword Principle sect would be strong enough to resist external enemies, even if Chu Fengmian was not around. Therefore, Chu Fengmian generously gave all the materials, divine elixir pills, and spiritual weapons that he did not need to the Sword Principle sect. Thank you, Sect Master. The people in the hall were overjoyed when they received the spiritual weapons and divine elixir pills. These things were priceless treasures to them and were enough to greatly improve their strength. This batch of divine elixir pills could even help many of them to improve their cultivation by 1 level. Except for Han Yueli and Luo Shi, the rest of you can leave now. Chu Fengmian said softly after giving all the instructions. Yes. The people in the hall left one after another, leaving only Chu Fengmian, Han Yueli, and Luo Shi in the hall. Thank you for your hard work this time. Chu Fengmian looked at Han Yueli and Luo Shi with gentleness in his eyes. He opened his arms. Han Yueli and Luo Shi walked over together and were embraced by Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian went to the Shanghai Star Field alone this time, leaving Han Yueli and Luo Shi behind. The two of them had been in charge of the Sword Principle sect. It was because of the two of them that the Sword Principle sect was able to develop and prosper. Speaking of which, Chu Fengmian was the most incompetent sect master. The Sword Principle sect is our home, Han Yueli said softly in Chu Fengmian's arms. Her cold demeanor had completely disappeared. She was like a little girl in Chu Fengmian's arms. First, set a small goal, such as 1 second. Remember, Bookhouse. Chapter 2078. Han Yueli was only 20 years old. Her coldness was her majesty. Only in front of Chu Fengmian could she reveal her true self. It had only been 2 years since Chu Fengmian met Han Yueli, but countless major events had happened in these 2 years. The whole world and the 9 regions had changed. Yes, Chu Fengmian murmured to himself after hearing Han Yueli's words. Swordsmanship sect was his home, the place where Chu Fengmian grew up. The master of swordsmanship was like a father to him. His senior brothers and sisters were equivalent to Chu Fengmian's brothers and sisters. But all of these disappeared in the battle 10,000 years ago. Chu Fengmian established swordsmanship sect because of his obsession. Therefore, anyone who dared to go against swordsmanship sect would be Chu Fengmian's mortal enemy. I won't let anyone destroy swordsmanship sect again. No one. Chu Fengmian's eyes were extremely cold, revealing boundless killing intent. We're here too, Luo Shi said after seeing Chu Fengmian's expression. Unknowingly, Chu Fengmian was no longer alone after his rebirth. I know, Luo Shi's words made the killing intent in Chu Fengmian's eyes fade away. The battle 10,000 years ago in swordsmanship sect was an unforgettable hatred in Chu Fengmian's heart. Every time Chu Fengmian thought of that scene, he would lose control. Chu Fengmian woke up and opened his empty ring. He took out a pair of blades and swords from his empty ring. The moment the pair of sword and saber appeared in the hall was swept by a sharp aura. Han Yueli and Luo Shi's expression changed drastically, as if they were facing a great enemy. But soon, the two of them reacted. The aura came from the pair of sword and saber in Chu Fengmian's hand. Chu Fengmian didn't even use his power to activate the pair of sword and saber. Just by being there, it contained an incomparably tyrannical power. This was the power of an immortal weapon. The two best immortal weapons Chu Fengmian had obtained from the Dark Whale hidden treasure were this pair of sword and saber. This pair of sword and saber is an immortal weapon. I got it by accident in the Shanghai Star Zone. I can give it to you. Chu Fengmian handed the sword to Luo Shi and Han Yueli respectively. Han Yueli was proficient in the way of a sword and was in charge of controlling the sword. Luo Shi's methods were strange, so this short sword was suitable for her. Immortal artifact. Han Yueli and Luo Shi were shocked to hear Chu Fengmian's name. Immortal weapons were extremely rare, even in the 9 domains. Although countless treasures had appeared during the upheaval of the 9 regions, there were only a few immortal weapons that had appeared. Although there were some rumors, at least in the entire Sword Dao sect, not a single immortal weapon could be found. But this time, Chu Fengmian took out 2 immortal treasures. Even Han Yueli and Luo, she couldn't imagine how much Chu Fengmian had gained from his trip to the Shanghai Star Zone. Not only had Chu Fengmian's strength skyrocketed, but he had also obtained a lot of treasures. These were all Chu Fengmian's gains from his trip to the Shanghai Star Zone. This is an immortal weapon. Han Yueli and Luo, she took the pair of sword and saber and quickly refined them. These 2 immortal weapons were originally sacrificial items in the Dark Whale hidden treasure. They were ownerless, so the refining process was extremely fast. Soon, the pair of sword and saber were refined by Han Yueli and Luo Shi. This pair of immortal weapons would only be able to display their true power after they had acknowledged their masters and refined them. The sharpness was dozens of times stronger than when Chu Fengmian had first taken them out. Just any one of those beams of light was enough to make an expert of the celestial realm try his best to resist a casual strike from the immortal weapon. After all, even among celestial realm experts, there were very few who could own an immortal weapon. Immortal generals were fine, but immortal warriors, and demon immortals were not qualified to own an immortal weapon. Among the immortal warriors and demon immortals, Chu Fengmian knew that the only one who owned an immortal weapon was the Donglin Ocean Emperor. However, the Donglin Ocean Emperor was the disciple of the Ocean Emperor and a genius nurtured by the Ocean Sacrificial Sect. He only had 2 immortal weapons. Moreover, the trident was bestowed upon him by the Ocean Emperor. Only the Life Seal was an opportunity that the Donglin Ocean Emperor had obtained himself. In fact, the Life Seal was only a half-immortal weapon in the hands of the Donglin Ocean Emperor. After all, the Donglin Ocean Emperor couldn't make the seal recognize him as its master. The power he could unleash was extremely limited. Only Chu Fengmian, who had cultivated the Life Emperor art, could fully control the Life Seal and unleash its full power. The quality of this pair of immortal weapons was even higher than the trident in the Donglin Ocean Emperor's possession. It could be used to great advantage against immortal warriors and demon immortals. However, the power of this pair of swords was incomparably tyrannical. However, Han Yueli and Luo Shi, after refining this pair of swords and casually using it, both of their brows tightly knitted together. The 2 of them had used up more than half of their spiritual power just by using the sword and saber to attack once. As such, even if the 2 of them were at their peak, they would only be able to use the pair of saber and sword immortal artifacts to attack twice. Once they activated the sword and saber immortal weapons twice, their spiritual energy would be exhausted, and they would lose all their strength. Any 9 tribulations Emperor Gu would be able to kill them. Even though the saber and sword immortal weapons were powerful, they consumed a great amount of their spiritual energy too. Immortal weapons had the word immortal in their name. Not only did they surpass heaven-grade spiritual weapons in power, but they also consumed an astronomical amount of spiritual energy. Only those who had truly ascended to immortality and entered the celestial realm were qualified to wield immortal weapons. After a demon immortal had overcome a heaven-defying tribulation and ascended to immortality, their strength would increase tenfold. At that time, it would be extremely easy for them to use the weapons. But now, Han Yueli and Luo, she were only half-step celestial realm cultivators. It would be too much for them to force themselves to use the weapons. Don't worry. I naturally have a way to let you use the weapons to your heart's content. Chu Fengmian smiled when he saw the changes in Hanuel Li and Luo Shi's expressions. Suddenly, a dozen sacred pills flew out of his palm. The moment these sacred pills flew out of Chu Fengmian's palm, an incomparably pure medicinal fragrance filled the entire hall. Just this medicinal fragrance alone could help some Emperor Realm cultivators improve their strength and consolidate their realm. It could even help them break through to the next realm. Chapter 2079. These dozens of Saint Elixir pills were engraved with ancient runes. These ancient and complex runes formed a formation of their own. These Saint Elixir pills contained a formation that condensed medicinal efficacy. Only Saint Elixir pills of the ancient grade could have such quality. Each ancient Saint Elixir pill was priceless, and its medicinal efficacy had the ability to seize the fortune of heaven and earth. Even for Chu Fengmian now, the ancient Saint Elixir pill had a good effect. It could help him consolidate his realm and even be used to break through to the celestial realm. However, this time, Chu Fengmian decided to take out some of the ancient Saint Elixir pills and give them to Hanuel Li and Luo Shi to help them cross the heaven-defying tribulation and step into the celestial realm. If Chu Fengmian wanted to break through to the celestial realm, it would be thousands of times more difficult than ordinary warriors. The resources needed would be even more massive. These ancient Saint Elixir pills were just a drop in the bucket for Chu Fengmian. If Chu Fengmian really wanted to break through the celestial tribulation, he would need thousands of ancient Saint Elixir pills, a large number of immortal stones, various rare items, countless resources, and immortal power to give Chu Fengmian a chance to break through the celestial tribulation. Once Chu Fengmian broke through to the celestial realm and triggered the celestial tribulation, he would be in an extremely dangerous situation. Previously, it was not Chu Fengmian who broke through to the celestial realm, but Lan Ming who triggered the celestial tribulation. The celestial tribulation chased after Chu Fengmian all the way, wanting to kill him. After Chu Fengmian crossed the heaven-defying tribulation and became a variant of heaven and earth, he had become an existence that the heavenly Tao did not tolerate. As long as there was a chance, the heavenly Tao would take action and kill Chu Fengmian. The last time the heavenly Tao took action, it used Lan Ming to trigger the heaven-defying tribulation and wanted to kill Chu Fengmian. Chu Fengmian was also extremely thrilling to get through the crisis. If Chu Fengmian took the initiative to break through to the celestial realm, the power of the celestial tribulation would be extremely terrifying. Once he stepped into the celestial realm, Chu Fengmian's encounters and the absolute beginning power he had fused with his body would be activated. At that time, Chu Fengmian's power would increase to an unimaginable level. The heavenly axiom would never allow Chu Fengmian to successfully step into the celestial realm. Therefore, for Chu Fengmian, transcending the celestial tribulation was an extremely dangerous thing. Without being fully prepared, Chu Fengmian would never rashly attempt the celestial tribulation. As such, instead of letting Chu Fengmian make a breakthrough to the celestial realm, it was better to let Hanuel Li and Luo Shi step into the celestial realm first. As long as the two of them stepped into the celestial realm, they would be able to easily control this pair of immortal weapons. Hanuel Li and Luo Shi were geniuses with innate divine bodies. Once they passed the celestial tribulation and stepped into the celestial realm, their strength would surpass most ordinary celestial realm experts. In addition to this pair of immortal weapons, as long as the two of them transcended the celestial tribulation and stepped into the celestial realm, their strength would be enough to sweep across the immortal realm and fight with immortal warrior experts. At that time, the two of them would become a great fighting force that could help Chu Fengmian. Therefore, after some consideration, Chu Fengmian decided to help the two of them break through to the celestial realm first. Ancient sacred elixirs? So many ancient sacred elixirs? Looking at the elixirs that appeared in front of them, Hanuel Li and Luo Shi were shocked. The 9 regions had undergone drastic changes, and countless treasures had appeared. The two of them had also obtained many opportunities that allowed their strength to improve so quickly. They had also obtained some ancient sacred elixirs. However, even in the 9 regions, the number of ancient sacred elixirs that appeared was not many. A few ancient sacred elixirs in a single treasure was already a lot. But now, Chu Fengmian had taken out more than a dozen ancient sacred elixirs in one go. Without exception, these ancient sacred elixirs were all used to break through to the next realm. No, you should keep these ancient sacred elixirs first. It's more important for you to break through to the celestial realm than us. Seeing Chu Fengmian take out more than a dozen ancient sacred elixirs, Han Yueli and Luo, she understood Chu Fengmian's intention and hurriedly said to him. They could also see that Chu Fengmian was now in the half-step celestial realm and needed a lot of resources to break through to the celestial realm. Every ancient sacred elixir was not easy to obtain. If he used up more than a dozen ancient sacred elixirs, it would take a lot of fortuitous encounters to obtain more. These ancient sacred elixirs are far from enough for me to break through to the next realm. Once I break through to the celestial realm, it will be extremely dangerous. The two of you should step into the celestial realm first. When I break through to the celestial realm in the future, I will have nothing to worry about. Chu Fengmian shook his head and said, now that the 9 regions have undergone a drastic change and are becoming more chaotic, I can't protect the entire Sword Principle sect alone. I need your help. Now, I will help you to refine these ancient sacred elixirs and break through to the celestial realm in one fell swoop. Han Yueli and Luo, she hesitated for a moment, but still nodded and said, all right. There was no need to be so polite between them. Since Chu Fengmian had said it so clearly, the two of them did not hesitate. The ancient sacred elixirs were divided into 2 parts and flew towards Han Yueli and Luo Shi. The ancient sacred elixirs were wrapped in spiritual power and were gradually refined. Incomparably pure medicinal efficacy flew out little by little. Devour the heavens. Seeing this, Chu Fengmian's heart skipped a beat, and he shouted coldly. The power of the heaven-devouring secret technique was instantly activated, turning into 2 heaven-devouring divine pythons and devouring the ancient sacred elixirs. The ancient sacred elixirs were devoured by the heaven-devouring divine pythons and refined in an instant, turning into countless pure medicinal efficacy. The impurities in them were all removed. Boom! An endless stream of pure medicinal efficacy surged into Han Yueli and Luo Shi's bodies. As the medicinal efficacy surged into their bodies, their auras rose steadily. This change in power could be clearly sensed by the entire Sword Origin world. What's going on? Is someone about to make a breakthrough? What a huge commotion. The entire Sword Origin world can clearly sense it. Countless disciples in the Sword Origin world raised their heads and sensed the 2 rising powers. As long as one was in the Sword Origin world, they could clearly sense the 2 rising powers. This direction, is it the direction of the main hall? Could it be that the sect master is about to make a breakthrough? Chapter 2080. Countless disciples of the Sword Dao sect were discussing with each other as they watched the ascension coming from the direction of the main hall. With such a huge commotion, the breakthrough was definitely no small matter. Even in the humming Sword Origin world, one could clearly sense such power. Only when one was breaking through to the celestial realm could such a commotion be caused. Almost all of them were guessing Chu Fengmian's identity. Chu Fengmian's strength had been vividly demonstrated when he returned and killed the incarnation of 9 sons, Emperor Wu and Yi Wuchang. He was definitely not inferior to the celestial being realm. No one would be surprised if Chu Fengmian had passed the celestial tribulation and broken through to the celestial being realm. Chu Fengmian's strength was stronger than the average celestial being realm expert. No one in the Sword Dao sect doubted that Chu Fengmian would pass the celestial tribulation in the future. However, the only celestial being realm expert in the Sword Dao sect, Mad Dragon Emperor, was very clear. The person who broke through was definitely not Chu Fengmian. He knew that Chu Fengyan was an existence who had passed the heaven-defying tribulation. His bloodline was comparable to the innate divine beasts. Once Chu Fengyan really tried to break through the celestial tribulation, it was something that the heavenly Tao would not tolerate. The commotion would be thousands of times greater than that of an ordinary demon god. Although the commotion was not small, it was definitely not Chu Fengyan. "I wonder what will happen when a young master breaks through," Mad Dragon Emperor murmured. The Mad Dragon Emperor mumbled to himself. He was also looking forward to the scene of Chu Fengyan breaking through and transcending the great tribulation of the Deva. It would be an earth-shattering scene that would shock the 9 regions. In the main hall, Chu Fengyan did not pay attention to the discussions outside. He was now fully focused on helping Han Yueli and Luo Shi break through. It was best to succeed in one attempt to break through the celestial tribulation. If the breakthrough failed, it would not only waste a lot of resources, but also affect the future strength. For example, the invincible experts of the ancient era all pressed forward courageously, walking on an invincible path. They had never failed to break through. This time, Han Yueli and Luo Shi's own realm was not enough to break through the celestial tribulation. The two of them had not been in the half-step celestial realm for long, so their foundation was not stable. Chu Fengyan had spent so many ancient sage pills because he wanted to help the two of them consolidate their cultivation before attempting the Deva tribulation. Generally, for martial artists and demon gods at the peak of the half-step celestial realm, 2 or 3 ancient sacred elixirs were enough to help them break through. This time, Chu Fengyan gave Han Yueli and Luo Shi 3 times the number of elixirs given to ordinary martial artists. He wanted to succeed in one fell swoop. Han Yueli and Luo Shi refined the medicinal power of the ancient sacred elixir bit by bit. Behind the two of them, 2 different portraits rose up. Behind Han Yueli was a world of ice and snow. In the center of this world, a spiritual sword stood there, representing Han Yueli's innate divine body, profound cold body, and her swordsmanship. Behind Luo Shi, there was a mass of primal chaos. Luo Shi originally cultivated the demonic technique of the 6 Paths Demon Gate. However, her bloodline was modified by Little Nine, and her strength was extremely close to Little Nine's. Hence, there was a mass of primal chaos around her. Chaos, a mass of blur and nothingness, but it contained one of the most mysterious forces in the world. Not to mention the celestial realm. Even the invincible experts of the profound heaven realm, or even the ultimate heaven realm, might not be able to comprehend the mystery of chaos. The pattern that rose behind the two of them represented their martial path. Before reaching the celestial being realm, a martial artist or demon god could still practice other martial arts. But once he had passed the celestial being tribulation and stepped into the celestial being realm, his martial arts would be completely formed and integrated with him. At that time, he could no longer change his martial arts. However, it was extremely difficult to recultivate. Ordinary martial artists or demon gods would not choose to recultivate at all. For example, Chu Fengyan had already opened up his own martial arts. This martial arts was created by Chu Fengyan himself. Chu Fengyan could only continue on this path and open up a new path. As the medicinal power was constantly refined and turned into their strength, the portraits behind them became clearer and clearer. An hour later, when the last bit of blur in the image became clear, Lin Fan's eyes lit up. A clap of thunder resounded in the sky. This thunderclap was just a prelude. Following that, more and more thunderous sounds rang out. The Deva tribulation had appeared. After Han Yueli and Luo Shi's strength reached the peak, the Deva tribulation appeared. In the main hall, Han Yueli and Luo Shi, who had their eyes closed, opened their eyes at the same time and saw Chu Fengyan standing in front of them at a glance. "Go!" Chu Fengyan had a slight smile on his face. "Yes." The two women nodded at the same time. They took a step forward and flew out of the main hall, standing in the sky above the Sword Dao sect. At the same time, Chu Fengyan also flew out and shouted loudly. "All disciples of the Sword Dao sect, hide in the main hall." Chu Fengyan's voice could be heard clearly by the entire Sword Dao sect. Given the strength of these Sword Dao School disciples, even the aftermath of the celestial tribulation could take their lives. Chu Fengyan didn't want these disciples to be affected. Hearing Chu Fengyan's voice, countless disciples of the Sword Dao sect woke up from their cultivation and flew in the direction of the main hall. The Cloud Feather Palace had formed a world of its own and could accommodate all the disciples of the Sword Dao sect. Almost all the disciples of the Sword Dao sect entered the main hall in less than half an hour. Sword Slayer King, Yan Hanshi, Qing Ming, and the others also hid in the main hall. Even their strength was not enough to withstand the Deva tribulation now. Besides Hanyue Li and Luo Shi, only Chu Fengyan was outside. Chu Fengyan hid at the edge of the Origin Sword world and watched the scene of the two women transcending the tribulation. It's actually the two vice sect masters, joining hands to transcend the tribulation. This is an extremely dangerous act. Since the two vice sect masters dared to join hands to transcend the tribulation, they must be confident. The Deva tribulation is something that has only been seen in ancient books. Now we're going to witness it with our own eyes. In the main hall, the disciples of the Sword Dao sect looked at the scene outside and discussed animatedly. For most of the disciples of the Sword Dao sect, the Deva tribulation was something that they had only heard of in ancient books. Now that they could witness it, they were incomparably excited. First, set a small goal, such as 1 second. Remember, Bookhouse. Chapter 2081. The 9 regions have been silent for 10,000 years. In the past 10,000 years, no celestial realm powerhouse had appeared in the 9 regions. Of course, Chu Fengyan knew that there must have been someone who had successfully transcended the sky, human tribulation, and reached the sky, human realm. However, the 7 great sects all had their own sacred grounds. No one outside would know that the tribulation had taken place in their sacred grounds. For example, Hanyue Li and Luo Shi's tribulation had taken place in the Sword Origin world. Only the disciples of the Sword Origin world would be able to sense it. For all the disciples of the Sword Dao sect, this was their first time witnessing the sky, human tribulation. Being able to witness it with their own eyes would be immensely beneficial to their future growth. Chu Fengyan stood at the edge of the Sword Origin world. Waves of spiritual power condensed in his palm, forming a formation that enveloped the hall and protected it. As for Chu Fengyan himself, he remained at the edge of the Sword Origin world. Chu Fengyan didn't know if Hanyue Li and Luo Shi's sky human tribulation would undergo the same changes as Lan Ming's sky human tribulation. He didn't know if the tribulation lightning would target Chu Fengyan. If there were any changes, Chu Fengyan would be the first to sense them and prepare to leave the Sword Origin world to avoid being implicated. Chu Fengyan stayed at the edge of the Sword Origin world so that he could leave at any time. Back then, Chu Fengyan had spent a lot of effort to mold the Sword Origin world into a sacred ground. He didn't want the Sword Origin world to be destroyed by the sky human tribulation. Tribulation clouds had already merged into one in the sky above the Sword Origin world. Thunderous rumbles could be heard from within the tribulation clouds. The tribulation clouds were still accumulating power. Only when the power gathered to the limit would the sky, human tribulation, truly descend. Especially this time, Hanyue Li and Luo Shi had teamed up to transcend the tribulation. One had to know that the power of the tribulation would increase by several times if 2 people were to face it. Teaming up to transcend the tribulation was actually an extremely dangerous action. It was possible that the 2 of them would die under the tribulation together. Even some peerless geniuses wouldn't dare to join forces to transcend the tribulation. However, this time, Chu Fengyan was incomparably confident in Hanyue Li and Luo Shi's tribulation. That was why he allowed the 2 of them to undergo the tribulation together. The more powerful the lightning tribulation was, the more benefits one would obtain after transcending the tribulation. After all, riches and honor were sought in the midst of danger. While the celestial tribulation was accumulating power, Hanyue Li and Luo Shi were also sitting under the tribulation cloud to consolidate their realm. In a short period of time, their strength had increased by 5 to 6 times. Activating the pair of celestial artifacts was no longer as difficult as before. The reason why the two of them chose to join forces to overcome the heavenly tribulation was because of the pair of celestial artifacts. The saber and sword celestial artifacts were a pair, and they were forged by the same master craftsman. Only when they worked together could they unleash their strongest power. While Hanueli and Luo, she were consolidating their realms, they were also familiarizing themselves with the power of the sword and saber. Rumble. 2 hours. For hours passed by slowly. Although the celestial tribulation had yet to descend, the tribulation lightning in the tribulation cloud was increasing in number. The sound of thunder could be clearly heard at every moment. Chu Fengyan looked into the tribulation cloud. His gaze penetrated the countless dark clouds and could clearly see the surging lightning within. The number of lightning bolts couldn't be described. They formed mountains and seas, and when they condensed, they formed mountains and seas of lightning. Any one of these lightning bolts could easily kill a half-step celestial realm martial artist or demon immortal. The accumulation is almost complete. Chu Fengyan could already see that in the sea of lightning, the lightning bolts had transformed into strange lightning beasts, lightning bulls, lightning tigers, and lightning bears. They were all creatures formed by lightning. Each of these strange lightning beasts contained the power to destroy everything. Rumble. With an earth-shattering roar, boundless destructive power suddenly descended. The celestial tribulation had truly descended. The strange lightning beasts formed by lightning bulls, lightning tigers, lightning bears, and lightning bears, many of which Chu Fengyan couldn't even name, roared and roared at Hanueli and Luo Shi below. These strange lightning beasts were born from lightning and represented destruction. They were meant to destroy everything. Rip! As these strange lightning beasts roared, the power they unleashed was so great that even the origin sword world couldn't withstand it. Cracks began to appear on its surface. Although the origin sword world was a sacred ground, it had just been born. It was like a baby in swaddling clothes and couldn't compare to the sacred grounds of the 7 great sections. The power of these strange lightning beasts had already surpassed what the origin sword world could withstand. If this continued, the origin sword world would be torn apart by the power of the celestial tribulation. Life Great Seal. Suppress. Chu Fengyan was already prepared when he saw this. A huge seal suddenly flew out from his palm. The Life Great Seal gradually grew in size until it was even larger than the origin sword world. The entire origin sword world was enveloped by the Life Great Seal. The Life Great Seal had the power to suppress everything. It could even suppress an entire world. Under the suppression of the Life Great Seal, the origin sword world gradually stabilized. The strange lightning beasts were no longer able to affect the origin sword world. Boom! On the other side, Hanueli and Luo, she had already clashed with the roaring, thunder-strange beasts. The two of them, one holding a saber and the other holding a sword, slashed out at the same time. The saber and sword merged. The blade and sword light fused into one and swept out. Bang! 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 Under the collision of the blade and sword light, the lightning beasts were shattered into pieces and exploded one after another. The strange lightning beasts couldn't even get close to Hanueli and Luo Shi before they were mercilessly killed by the saber and sword. This was the power of an immortal artifact. If a celestial realm expert could obtain an immortal artifact, his strength would increase by at least 2-fold. Moreover, Hanueli and Luo Shi were currently wielding a pair of immortal artifacts. When the two of them worked together, the power of this pair of immortal artifacts far exceeded that of ordinary immortal artifacts. Roar! Roar! Countless strange lightning beasts were swept away and killed. Dragon roars resounded from the tribulation clouds in the sky. Following these roars, enormous lightning dragons suddenly appeared. Dragons were the kings of the monster beast race. These lightning dragons were the most powerful lightning beasts in the world. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of thunderbolts roared and charged downwards. First, set a small target. For example, 1 second. Remember, Book Abode. Chapter 2082. Come. Hanuel Li and Luo Shi raised their heads at the same time and looked at the hundreds of thunder dragons roaring down from the sky. There was no trace of fear in their eyes. Instead, there was a boundless fighting spirit in their eyes. The power of the saber and sword immortal artifacts in their hands had been accumulated to the limit. Suddenly, the sword and the saber were unsheathed at the same time. The blade and the sword radiance soared into the sky. Rumble. The thunder dragons that descended were all destroyed by the blade and the sword radiance. At the same time, the sword and the saber were pointed at the tribulation clouds in the sky. The blade and the sword radiance, after slaying countless thunder dragons in an instant, suddenly rushed into the tribulation clouds in the sky. The tribulation clouds in the sky were instantly turned upside down. Is it so easy to pass the great Deva tribulation? The disciples of the Sword Tao sect in the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace looked at the scene outside through the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace and felt that it was unreal. The great Deva tribulation, according to the ancient records, was extremely dangerous. It could be said that when facing the great Deva tribulation, even the most talented martial artists would be incomparably fearful. One wrong step would mean stepping into the abyss and being consigned to eternal damnation. The danger of the great Deva tribulation was recorded in countless ancient records and mentioned again and again. However, looking at Hanuel Li and Luo Shi, who were working together to pass the tribulation, it was so easy that they did not even feel the slightest sense of danger. For the two of them, the great Deva tribulation seemed to be no difficulty at all. Countless disciples of the Sword Tao sect felt that it was unreal. However, some of the powerful people in the Cloud Feather Heavenly Palace, such as Emperor Yin, Qing Ming, Yan Hanshi, Luo He, and others, could see the mystery of it. Almost all of them were at the peak of the half-step celestial realm. They were only one step away from the great Deva tribulation. Once they passed the great Deva tribulation, they would become immortals and step into the celestial realm. Therefore, now that Hanuel Li and Luo Shi had passed the great Deva tribulation, it was also a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for them to comprehend many mysteries from it. They could tell that the reason Hanuel Li and Luo Shi could face the great tribulation of the Deva so easily was not because the power of the great tribulation of the Deva was weak. On the contrary, because Hanuel Li and Luo Shi were working together to pass the tribulation, the power of the great Deva tribulation skyrocketed several times. It was much more powerful than the ordinary great Deva tribulation. Facing the great Deva tribulation, none of them were confident. The reason why Hanuel Li and Luo Shi were able to pass their tribulations so easily was because of the pair of sabers and swords. They were immortal items that could withstand the attacks of the Deva tribulations. It could be said that 99% of the power of the countless tribulation thunders that descended from the celestial being tribulation have been resisted by the pair of sabers and swords. The remaining power was naturally insignificant. After all, immortal artifacts were precious treasures that even immortals, immortal warriors, and Yao gods might not be able to own if they didn't have a shocking background. Now, Hanuel Li and Luo Shi each held an immortal weapon. In addition, Chu Fumian had given them more than a dozen primordial sacred elixirs to maximize their medicinal effects. In terms of strength, the two of them were now more powerful than most immortal realm martial artists and demon immortals. Therefore, the celestial tribulation, which was described in countless ancient books as extremely dangerous, posed no threat to the two of them at all. In the sky, bolts of tribulation lightning continued to strike down. However, this pair of blade and sword were held high above Hanuel Li and Luo Shi's heads. Any bolt of tribulation lightning that fell was mercilessly shattered by this pair of blade and sword. It simply couldn't hurt the two of them. 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours passed. Chu Fumian stood at the edge of the origin sword world, watching all of this quietly. Finally, the tribulation clouds of the great Deva tribulation dispersed the moment the last bolt of tribulation lightning fell. A golden light descended from the sky and enveloped Hanuel Li and Luo Shi. This golden light was the standard for successfully passing the Great Deva Tribulation. Under this golden light, Hanyu Li and Luo Shi's strength continued to rise until it increased by 3 or 4 times. Finally, the growth of their strength stopped. They had successfully passed the tribulation. At this moment, Hanyu Li and Luo Shi had successfully ascended to the immortal realm and stepped into the celestial realm. From now on, they were completely different from the Emperor realm. They had stepped into the immortal realm. Although it was only the first of the 9 immortal realm, the celestial realm, they were already considered as immortals. After successfully passing the tribulation, Hanyu Li and Luo Shi's bodies absorbed all the medicinal efficacy accumulated from refining the ancient Saint Pill. Now, although the two of them had just stepped into the celestial realm, their strength had already surpassed many immortal realm martial artists and demon gods. If they activated their immortal artifacts, they could even fight with the Mad Dragon Emperor. When the Mad Dragon Emperor was a half step into the celestial realm, he had been stuck for 10,000 years because of his failure to pass the Great Deva Tribulation. His strength had accumulated to an incredible extent. When he stepped into the celestial realm, he had reached the peak of the immortal realm. Now, Hanyu Li and Luo Shi had also reached the same level of strength. They were probably not inferior to the 9 sons, Emperor Wu and Yi Wu Chang, who were old ancestors of sect. From now on, the Sword Dao sect had 3 celestial realm experts. In addition to Chu Fengyan, there were 4 celestial realm experts. Even the 9 regions, they were not a small force. If anyone dared to underestimate the Sword Dao sect, they would have to pay a terrible price. The Heavenly Dao did not intervene this time. Chu Fengyan had always been at the edge of the origin sword boundary, ready to leave at any time. However, Hanyu Li and Luo Shi's tribulation this time was incomparably peaceful. There were no accidents like when Lan Ming passed the Great Deva Tribulation. This allowed Chu Fengyan to breathe a sigh of relief. However, Chu Fengyan was also very clear in his heart that the Heavenly Dao would never allow him to step into the celestial realm after passing the Great Deva Tribulation and becoming a variant of heaven and earth. This time, the Heavenly Dao did not intervene because it felt that even if it intervened, it might not be able to do anything to Chu Fengyan. When Chu Fengyan went to pass the Great Deva Tribulation, that would be the real danger. At that time, Chu Fengyan would definitely be obstructed by the Heavenly Dao and would most likely die. Chu Fengyan had to accumulate his strength to the limit and be fully prepared before he broke through to the celestial realm. Fortunately, Chu Fengyan was not in a hurry to break through to the celestial realm. His strength was already not inferior to an immortal general expert. There was no need to rush to improve his strength. In a chapter 2083. Moreover, Chu Fengyan had yet to fully refine and familiarize himself with what he had gained from the Songhai Star Field. Once he had familiarized himself with all the opportunities he had gained from the Sacrificial Lake and the Xianjing Hidden Treasure, his strength could be further improved. Hanyu Li and Luo Shi had successfully passed the Heavenly Human Tribulation. The restriction above the cloud feather Heavenly Palace had also been lifted. The disciples of the Sword Dao sect had turned into rays of light and flew out. They looked at the 2 women in the sky and said respectfully, "Congratulations to the 2 vice sect leaders for ascending to immortality and becoming heavenly human beings." The Sword Slayer King, Qing Meng, Emperor Yin, Luo He, and the others also came out and congratulated them. Every disciple of the Sword Dao sect had a joyful look on their faces. Now that Hanyu Li and Luo Shi had passed the Heavenly Human Tribulation together, the Sword Dao sect had 2 more Heavenly Human Realm experts. This would make the Sword Dao sect even more powerful in the future, and its status in the 9 regions would also rise steadily. Now that you have successfully passed the tribulation and stepped into the Heavenly Human Realm, it's time to teach the 5 major sects a lesson. Chu Fengyan also flew over and looked at the 2 women and said, he did not take action against the 5 major sects because he wanted to wait for Hanyu Li and Luo Shi to step into the Heavenly Human Realm so that he could take them to attack the 5 major sects lair. With Chu Fengyan's current strength, he could wipe out the 5 major sects by himself. Although there were at least 5 heavenly human realm experts in the 5 major sections. Ordinary immortal realm, and even immortal realm demon gods were no different from ants in Chu Fengmian's eyes. Chu Fengmian could easily kill them if he wanted to. However, the 5 major sects were actually a trial stone. Han Yueli and Luo, she had just stepped into the heavenly human realm. Although their strength had skyrocketed, they still needed to familiarize themselves with the control of their power. Even if they were monstrous geniuses, they needed to familiarize themselves with their strength after stepping into a new realm. Only then could they fully control their new power. The 5 major sects were equivalent to the trial stone for Hanyuel Li and Luo Shi. They could also familiarize themselves with their strength by fighting against the 5 major sections. All right, Hanyuel Li and Luo Shi both nodded. Both of their eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Having just stepped into the celestial realm, the two of them also wanted to find opponents to test their current strength. The 5 great sects were the best targets. Go! Chu Fengmian didn't speak any nonsense. He waved his hand, and the surrounding space was suddenly torn apart. The torn space gradually condensed in Chu Fengmian's palm and slowly turned into a spatial tunnel in front of Chu Fengmian. The moment the spatial tunnel was formed, Chu Fengmian stepped into it without hesitation. Hanyuel Li and Luo Shi followed closely behind and stepped into the spatial tunnel. After Chu Fengmian and the other two stepped into the spatial tunnel, it immediately disappeared. The disciples of the Sword Dao sect below looked up at the sky with anticipation. They knew in their hearts that the end of the 5 great sects had arrived. Sect Master's strength is still so terrifying and unfathomable. Sword Slayer King looked at the disappearing spatial tunnel and muttered to himself. He couldn't see clearly how Chu Fengmian tore the space and formed the spatial tunnel. As for the profoundness of Chu Fengmian's strength, he couldn't see through it at all. It was the same for the others. Even the Mad Dragon Emperor couldn't see through Chu Fengmian's true strength. The current Chu Fengmian was even more unfathomable. Although everyone knew that Chu Fengmian was in the half-step celestial realm, his strength had already surpassed the celestial realm and reached an unbelievable level. The people present chatted with each other for a while and then dispersed to cultivate in seclusion. Many of the people present were about to break through the celestial tribulation and reach the celestial realm. They had just finished watching Hanyuel Li and Luo Shi's tribulation and comprehended the mystery of the celestial tribulation. Now, they were cultivating in seclusion to comprehend the mystery. The Sword Dao sect became silent again. On the other side, in the depths of the void, the spatial tunnel traversed countless layers of space before arriving at the front of a huge world. The space around the 9 domains was opened up layer by layer, and no one knew how many small worlds were hidden in it. According to the records in the ancient books, there were tens of thousands of small worlds around the 9 domains. The returning ruins sky, 1,000 treasure sky, and the famous treasured lands in the 9 domains were actually independent small worlds that surrounded the 9 domains. The number of tens of thousands was only recorded in the ancient books. No one knew how many hidden small worlds there were. Some of these small worlds were created by the heavens and earth, while others were created by the peerless experts of the 9 realms with their immortal force. Their sizes varied greatly. Some small worlds, like the returning ruins sky and 1,000 treasure sky, were full of treasures. They were absolute treasured lands that all martial artists and demon gods dreamed of entering. Some micro-worlds were extremely dangerous and full of danger. Even if an expert of the celestial realm entered them, he would face the risk of death. In terms of danger, they were no less dangerous than many famous dangerous places in the extraterritorial starry sky. There were also small worlds that contained spirit springs and rich spiritual chi, which were suitable for cultivation. Such small worlds had long been occupied by various forces and nurtured, transforming into holy lands. The 7 major sects had as many experts as there were clouds in the sky. This was because each of the 7 major sects had their own independent small worlds that had been nurtured into holy lands. The martial artists and demon gods who cultivated in sacred lands were dozens or even hundreds of times faster than outside. It was because of this that the 7 great sects could remain strong and rule the 9 domains for tens of thousands of years. And right before them, the huge world ahead was hundreds of times larger than the Sword Origin world. The coordinates of this small world were hidden in the depths of the spatial folds. Even the ancient books of the 9 domains did not record the existence of such a small world. It seemed like the 5 great sects were the first to discover this pocket dimension. When they discovered this pocket dimension, they moved all their disciples to this pocket dimension and managed it well. Now, it had become the headquarters of the 5 great sections. Chu Fumian looked over and saw martial artists and demon gods flying in the small world. They were all disciples of the 5 great sects, and there were about 10,000 of them. Chapter 2084. Each of the 5 great sects was a force that ruled this star field. They were much more powerful than the 4 great forces of the Daluo star field. Of course, they would have more than a few disciples. However, this time, the 5 great sects came to the 9 territories to seize the treasures of the 9 territories. Some disciples who were too weak would be meaningless even if they came to the 9 territories. Therefore, Chu Fumian could see that almost all the cultivators and monster gods in this small world were above the Emperor realm. As for Emperor Gu, there were many disciples above the 9 tribulations Emperor Gu. Chu Fumian, Annuali, and Luo, she stood at the top of this small world and looked down. Chu Fumian's spiritual sense had already probed deeply into the small world. Chu Fumian could clearly see the countless restrictions and formations that had been set up in this small world. Even many hidden barriers and spirit arrays couldn't hide from Chu Fumian's eyes. There are so many spirit springs. Chu Fumian's eyes flashed with surprise. In this small world, Chu Fumian found more than a dozen spirit springs. These spiritual springs did not belong to this small world. Instead, they had been transported to this small world from a faraway place by some powerful experts using supreme means. It seemed that these spirit springs were the original spirit springs of the 5 great sections. This time, the 5 great sects had joined forces and led all their elite disciples to the 9 territories. They had already planned to establish a long-term foothold in the 9 territories. Therefore, they had moved the spirit springs from their sects to the 9 territories. These spirit springs also became array cores, supporting an incomparably huge spirit array above this small world. Chu Fumian could vaguely see that there was a spirit array above this small world. Any cultivator who wanted to come out of this small world had to hold a jade talisman in their hand to pass through freely. If one barged in, they would definitely be killed by this spirit array. On this formation, Chu Fumian felt 5 different forces. Obviously, this formation was set up by the 5 experts in the celestial being realm of the 5 sections. When the power of this formation suddenly erupted, immortals, even immortal warriors and demon immortals would have to retreat. However, the corners of Chu Fumian's mouth curled into a sneer. With his current strength, he could even contend against immortal generals. Although this formation was powerful, it was still nothing in Chu Fumian's eyes. Seal. Chu Fumian suddenly took out the life seal. The space within the seal instantly grew countless times larger, and the entire minor world was enveloped by the life seal. All of this happened quietly, so that the ancestors of the 5 biggest sects and the 5 celestial being realm experts in this worldlet did not notice it at all. Since he was going to attack the 5 biggest sects, Chu Fumian was prepared to kill them in one blow, not giving them any chance to breathe. Now that the life seal had sealed this minor world, it had turned into a cage. No one would want to escape from it. Unless one had the power to break the life seal, no one would be able to escape from it. Chu Fumian always cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, leaving no future troubles. After doing all this, Chu Fumian took a step forward and directly entered the minor world. Hanwei and Luo she followed at the same time. In an instant, 3 streaks of light fell into the minor world at the same time. At the same time, The huge formation in the sky above this small world also sensed the arrival of Chu Fengmian and the other two. With a loud bang, the moment Chu Fengmian and the other two landed in this small world, the power of this spirit array suddenly descended. 5 different forces turned into 5-colored divine rays, bombarding from all directions. "Break it for me." Chu Fengmian's face didn't show the slightest hint of nervousness when he saw the 5-colored divine light bombarding him. He was incomparably relaxed. He waved his hand, and the 5-colored divine light was suddenly grasped in his palm. The 5-colored divine rays, which even the Immortal Realm and Immortal Warrior Realm experts were afraid of, were now caught by Chu Fengmian with his bare hands. They did not even have the strength to struggle in Chu Fengmian's palm. Bam! As Chu Fengmian exerted force in his palm, the 5-colored divine rays were directly crushed by Chu Fengmian. At the same time, the heaven-devouring power also began to circulate in Chu Fengmian's body. A huge black hole suddenly condensed above Chu Fengmian's head. The moment the black hole condensed, an incomparably huge suction force immediately erupted. Streaks of 5-colored divine rays bombarded towards Chu Fengmian, but before they could get close to Chu Fengmian, they were mercilessly devoured by the heaven-devouring secret technique. The streaks of 5-colored divine rays could not threaten Chu Fengmian at all. They were all devoured by the heaven-devouring secret technique before they could even get close to Chu Fengmian. However, Chu Fengmian did not summon the heaven-devouring secret technique to deal with the 5-colored divine rays this time. Chu Fengmian's spiritual consciousness swept across the entire pocket world. The dozen or so spiritual springs located underground were all within Chu Fengmian's sight. Chu Fengmian's spiritual consciousness locked onto them. Currently, the Origin Sword world was lacking spiritual springs. Now that there were a dozen or so spiritual springs, Chu Fengmian would certainly not let them go. Rumble. Waves of tyrannical dragon power erupted from Chu Fengmian's back. These waves of dragon power transformed into incomparably huge dragon claws behind Chu Fengmian. A total of 17 dragon claws appeared behind Chu Fengmian. Following Chu Fengmian's roar, the 17 dragon claws abruptly clawed at the 17 spirit springs in this pocket dimension. For a moment, the mountains and rivers were shattered. Countless mountains were crushed by the dragon claws. Not good. Is there an enemy coming? Quick, set up the formation to deal with the enemy. Many disciples of the 5 major sects were cultivating in seclusion on the mountain peaks of this pocket world. When they suddenly saw the dragon claws approaching, their expressions changed abruptly. They joined forces to set up the formation in an attempt to withstand the bombardment of the dragon claws. However, the defensive array formation that had been hastily set up simply couldn't withstand the power of the dragon claws. In an instant, it was all swept away, and a large number of the disciples of the 5 major sects were all killed by the dragon claws. End of chapter. Chapter 2085. Previously, when the 5 sects joined forces to invade the North region and attack the Sword Principle sect, it was not only the experts of the 5 sects who took action, but also all the disciples of the 5 sections. The hands of the disciples of the 5 sects were stained with the blood of the Sword Principle sect's disciples. Facing the disciples of the 5 sects, Chu Fengmian did not have the slightest intention of showing mercy. As long as the disciples of the 5 sects dared to stop Chu Fengmian would directly attack and kill them all. However, the ultimate goal of the 17 dragon claws was the spiritual spring located underground. As the 17 dragon claws penetrated the ground at the same time, the spiritual springs were all uprooted. For a moment, the ground in this small world shook and the mountains and rivers shattered. Countless disciples of the 5 sects died in Chu Fengmian's hands. What's going on? Why is someone attacking our 5 extremes world? Just as these spirit springs were being grabbed by the dragon claw, 2 figures suddenly appeared. These 2 figures seemed to have rushed back from outside. Seeing the shattered mountains and rivers in this small world and the disciples of the 5 sects, the 2 figures' eyes were filled with boundless anger. They immediately looked at Chu Fengmian. A puny half-step celestial being? Kill him. The moment they saw Chu Fengyan's realm clearly, the two figures rushed towards Chu Fengyan without any hesitation. Two spiritual powers bombarded Chu Fengyan. The two spiritual powers, one of them was wind and the other was thunder. This was the secret skill of the Fengling sect and the Myriad Thunder Palace, two of the 5 sections. The two figures were the celestial being experts of the Fengling sect and the Myriad Thunder Palace, Feng Qingzi and the Mountain Master of the Thunder Palace. The main character is finally here. Chu Fengyan recognized the two figures at the same time. The two ancestors of the 5 sects finally couldn't help but take action after Chu Fengyan wantonly destroyed this small world and plundered the spiritual springs. Chu Fengyan could see that Feng Qingzi and the Mountain Master of the Thunder Palace were both celestial being and immortal realm martial artists. Chu Fengyan did not care about their strength at all, but he did not take action now. Instead, he turned to Han Yueli and Luo Shi and said, "I'll leave these two to you." This time, Chu Fengyan brought Han Yueli and Luo Shi here to let them fight with real experts of the celestial realm and familiarize themselves with their own strength. 10,000 years of bitter cultivation was not as satisfying as a bloody battle. All right, Han Yueli and Luo Shi instantly chose their opponents. Han Yueli faced Feng Qingzi, while Luo Shi faced the Mountain Master of the Thunder Hall. Suddenly, a surge of spiritual energy shot out, blocking Feng Qingzi and the Mountain Master of the Thunder Hall. Two heaven-tier warriors. Feng Qingzi and the Thunder Hall's lord were stopped. Seeing the sudden appearance of Han Yueli and Luo Shi, they were slightly surprised. Two Sky Realm warriors had appeared out of nowhere. Celestial Realm martial artists were not as common as cabbages. Most of the overlords of the third-grade starfields were only Celestial Realm martial artists. The 5 major sects only had 5 Celestial Realm experts when they joined forces. Especially when the two of them saw the appearance of Han Yueli and Luo Shi, they were extremely shocked. Are they from the Sword Dao sect? How is it possible? Since when did the Sword Dao sect have 2 more Celestial Realm martial artists? Before dealing with the Sword Dao sect, the 5 major sects were fully prepared. They had already scouted out the strength of the Sword Dao sect. Among the experts of the Sword Dao sect, only the Mad Dragon Emperor was a true Celestial Realm expert. As for the others, those half-step Celestial Realm martial artists and demon gods were nothing in their eyes. As for the disciples, the Sword Dao sect was far inferior to the 5 major sects. It was because of this that the 5 major sects joined forces to invade the North region and attack the Sword Dao sect. Feng Qingzi and the Thunder Hall's Mountain Master had thought that the 5 great sects were suddenly attacked in this small world. They had thought that the other extraterrestrial forces had also set their eyes on this small world, which was why they had come to attack. However, they did not expect that the Sword Dao sect would come, especially Han Yueli and Luo Shi, who had also gone to the battlefield to kill the enemy. At that time, their strength was only at the half-step Celestial Realm. As for strength, there was still a huge gap between them and the Celestial Realm. Even when they were at the half-step Celestial Realm, Han Yueli and Luo Shi's realm was not considered the peak. However, in just a few days, Chu Fengyan and Han Yueli had already passed the Celestial Tribulation, ascended to immortality, and stepped into the Celestial Realm. Feng Qingzi and the Mountain Master of the Thunder Hall could not believe this speed. Both of them had gone through the great tribulation of the Celestial Being Realm. However, it was precisely because of that they knew how difficult it was to ascend to immortality and step into the Celestial Being Realm. However, the appearance of Han Yueli and Luo Shi in front of them made them believe everything. In such a short time, they have stepped into the Celestial Realm. This is definitely a treasure. There's a heaven-shaking opportunity. Under the shock, greed appeared in the eyes of Feng Qingzi and the Mountain Master of the Thunder Hall. To be able to suddenly break through to the next realm in just a few days. Han Yueli and Luo Shi must have obtained an amazing opportunity. If they could get such an opportunity and divide it, they would have the hope of reaching a higher realm in the future. You have just stepped into the Celestial Realm, and you dare to attack the 5 great sects? You are really seeking death. You are not even familiar with the power. How dare you make an enemy of me? I will suppress you. I will make your sword Dao sect submit to the 5 great sects. Feng Qingzi shouted coldly. A horsetail whisk appeared in his hand. He waved the horsetail whisk gently, and a boundless gale swept towards Han Yueli. Although the horsetail whisk was not an immortal item, it could be said that it was a half-immortal item. In the hands of Feng Qingzi, it could display an extremely powerful force. The boundless gale was like a sharp blade. Any one of them could easily destroy a half-step Celestial Realm warrior. Even Celestial Realm and Immortal Realm warriors would be injured or killed if they were careless and touched the boundless gale. The moment Feng Qingzi made his move, he displayed the strength that he had been famous for a long time. Feng Qingzi was an invincible overlord in the soaring wind star area. He was the real #1 person. The boundless wild wind swept across, causing Han Yueli to instantly fall into a passive state. She could only continuously resist the erosion of the wild wind, unable to resist at all. On the other side, Luo, she was in a similar situation. After a few rounds, Luo, she was also in a disadvantageous position. End of chapter. Chapter 2086. Feng Qingzi and the Lord of Thunderhall were experts who had been famous for a long time. They had stepped into the Celestial Realm for at least 1,000 years, so they were very proficient in controlling their power. Han Yueli and Luo, she had just broken through. Although they were not inferior to Feng Qingzi and the Lord of Thunderhall in terms of strength, they were far inferior in terms of controlling their power. After a few rounds, the two of them had fallen into a disadvantageous position. Chu Fengmian stood aside and did not prepare to take action. Unless Han Yueli and Luo, she were in a desperate situation, Chu Fengmian would not take action. Only in a battle of life and death could a real expert be honed. In the future, if Chu Fengmian left the 9 regions and went to the 3 great holy realms, the Sword Principal sect would definitely need Han Yueli and Luo, she to take charge. This battle was a good training for the two of them. However, although Chu Fengmian would not take action, his eyes were constantly looking around. Many disciples of the 5 major sects and some elders of the 5 major sects who were half a step into the celestial realm quietly approached. They were also watching the battle between Qing Fengzi and Han Yueli. Their eyes flashed with a strange light as they gathered their spiritual power. Suddenly, just when Han Yueli was about to be forced into a desperate situation by Qing Fengzi, several elders of the Fengling sect suddenly took action. A total of 9 of them, who were half a step into the celestial realm of the Fengling sect, took action at the same time. The spiritual power in their hands suddenly condensed into a wind blade and slashed toward Han Yueli's back. The battle between the celestial realm experts required them to go all out. At this time, there was no time to spare to observe the surroundings. These elders of the Fengling sect who were half a step into the celestial realm were well aware of this. When Han Yueli was in danger, they suddenly launched a sneak attack. It was extremely sinister. However, the moment the wind blade approached Han Yueli's back, a sword light suddenly flashed and hit the wind blade, shattering it. Sneak attack? The people from the 5 great sects are a bunch of despicable people. Chu Fengmian sneered and mocked. He had been observing from his side all this time because he didn't allow anyone else to intervene in this battle. Kill this brat first. Hearing Chu Fengmian's sarcasm, the 9 wind-soaring sect elders' faces turned ugly. Launching a sneak attack was indeed a taboo among warriors. However, at this time, they did not care so much. They looked at Chu Fengmian. When they saw that Chu Fengmian was only in the half-step celestial realm, the 9 elders suddenly attacked together. The wind spiritual power flowed in their palms and condensed on one of them. It turned into countless wind blades and slashed toward Chu Fengmian. The power of each wind blade was so fast that no one could react in time. The wind blades were already in front of Chu Fengmian. "Break!" Chu Fengmian shouted softly. He stood still and did not even want to move. Chu Fengmian slowly raised a finger and drew a line. From Chu Fengmian's fingertip, it turned into a sword chi and soared into the sky. This sword chi turned into a sharp blade and swept everything. Bam! Bam! The numerous wind blades that the 9 wind-soaring sect elders launched together were all shattered in an instant. What? What kind of strength is this? Seeing that their wind blades were shattered by Chu Fengyan's finger, the 9 wind-soaring sect elders' eyes were filled with horror. The 9 elders of the Soaring Wind sect were the best among the half-step celestial being realm experts in the Soaring Windstar area. They had been famous in the Soaring Windstar area for a long time. Now, the 9 of them were so vulnerable in front of Chu Fengyan. They now understood that they had underestimated Chu Fengyan. Retreat. Use the power of the sect's formation. Deal with this man. The 9 elders of the Soaring Wind sect suddenly retreated as jade talismans flew out from their palms. The moment the jade talismans flew out, a huge formation rose up from the mountains beneath their feet. This large formation was the Mountain Protection Formation of the Wind Soaring sect. Wind Soaring destroys the world. The 9 Wind Soaring sect elders roared at the same time. Their strength was injected into the Mountain Protection Formation. Suddenly, the power of the Mountain Protection Formation erupted and fell from the sky, aiming at Chu Fengyan. Go to hell. Chu Fengyan's face was expressionless as he watched the protective mountain array descend. However, a surge of dragon power erupted from Chu Fengyan's body and an incomparably huge war dragon claw appeared behind him. The moment the war dragon claw was formed, it suddenly bombarded the Mountain Protection Formation that was descending from the sky. Bam! With a loud explosion, the two forces collided in the air. The Fengling sect's Mountain Protection Array was shattered by the War Dragon's claw. The 9 elders of the Wind Soaring sect were sent flying. Blood spurted out from their mouths as they looked at Chu Fengyan in horror, as if they were looking at a monster. With the 9 of them joining forces and the power of the Wind Soaring sect's Mountain Guarding Array, even a real Celestial Realm expert would have to retreat. It was impossible for him to shatter the Mountain Guarding Array with one blow. The protective mountain array was destroyed, and many of the disciples of the 5 great sects were killed by the aftershocks. Chu Fengyan's expression was indifferent. This time, he would not let anyone off when he attacked the 5 biggest sections. The death of these disciples was not a big deal. Anyway, the people of the 5 biggest sects were all people who deserved to die. Chu Fengyan looked at the 9 elders of the Fengling sect. The 9 elders were severely injured, and their faces were extremely pale. When they saw Chu Fengyan looking at them, they were shocked. When they saw Chu Fengyan looking at them, the 9 Wind Soaring sect elders suddenly felt a sense of fear. They turned around and fled without looking back. The escape lights of the 9 elders were pushed to the extreme in an attempt to escape. They no longer had the courage to face Chu Fengyan. However, Chu Fengyan looked at the 9 Wind Soaring sect elders and shouted. Behind Chu Fengyan, the world's edge sword box suddenly opened. Tens of thousands of sword chis flew out from it. These sword chis tore through the void at an extremely fast speed. The 9 Wind Soaring sect elders did not run far. Their bodies stopped in the air, and in the next moment, their bodies exploded. They were killed by the sword chi. End of chapter. Chapter 2087. Chu Fengyan didn't even need to do anything to kill the 9 Fengling sect elders. With his current strength, he didn't need to do anything to kill half-step Celestial Realm cultivators. After killing the 9 elders, the sword chi scattered in all directions, killing the disciples of the 5 great sects one after another. Chu Fengyan was a person who always cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, leaving no future troubles. In an instant, as the sword chi flashed, the disciples of the 5 great sects died under the sword chi. Damn it! Damn it! Qing Fengzi attacked again and again, controlling countless gusts of wind to bombard Hanuel Li from all directions. His face was full of anger. Chu Fengyan was extremely angry when he saw the disciples of the 5 great sects being slaughtered. The disciples of the 5 great sects in this small world were all elite disciples of the 5 great sects. They had brought these disciples to the 9 regions in order to establish a foothold in the 9 regions. Therefore, they had not hesitated to give up the star regions that they had once controlled. But now, under Chu Fengyan's wanton massacre, Thousands of disciples of the five great sects were killed by Chu Feng Mian's sword Qi in a few breaths. In this way, even if they won today, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. With so many Emperor Realm disciples, they didn't know how long it would take for them to cultivate them. He couldn't wait to kill Chu Feng Mian now. But now, Han Yueli was still fighting with him, so he couldn't be distracted. Ice Lotus. Han Yueli held the spirit sword in her hand, and countless sword Qi slashed at Feng Qingzi. The sword Qi flashed and turned into ice lotuses. She had completely mastered the mystery of the Ice Lotus sword technique. The Ice Lotus sword technique was once a Sword Dao sect's sword technique. It was one of the top Sword Dao sect sword techniques and was extremely powerful. Now, with Han Yueli's profound, cold physique, the Ice Lotus sword technique was like a sword technique that was custom-made for her. In the hands of Han Yueli, the power of the Ice Lotus sword technique was no less than an immortal technique. What was worse was that the situation on the battlefield was slowly turning towards Han Yueli's side. After exchanging blows with Qing Fengzi, Han Yueli's control over her power had far surpassed before. When she was going through the Skyman tribulation, she had joined forces with Luo Shi. Although joining hands to overcome the tribulation was an extremely dangerous move, the benefits they would reap would be even greater if they succeeded. In terms of strength, there wasn't much of a difference between Han Yueli and Feng Qingzi. The reason why Han Yueli was at a disadvantage was because Han Yueli, who had just broken through, was far inferior to Feng Qingzi. But now, after exchanging blows again and again, Han Yueli's control over her power had become extremely familiar. Now, Han Yueli was no longer defending passively, but taking the initiative to attack. A few sword edges slashed towards Feng Qingzi from all directions. When the sword edges got close to Feng Qingzi, even Feng Qingzi couldn't react in time. He hurriedly gathered his spiritual energy to defend himself, but there was still a sword edge that slashed his arm. Hiss! The power of each wind blade was extremely fast, causing people to be unable to react in time. The wind blade was already in front of Chu Fengyan. "Break!" Chu Fengyan shouted. He stood in the same place and didn't even have the thought of moving. Chu Fengyan slowly raised a finger and drew a line. From Chu Fengyan's fingertip, it turned into a sword Qi and soared into the sky. This sword Qi turned into a sharp blade, sweeping everything in its path. Bam! Bam! The numerous wind blades that the 9 elders of the wind-soaring sect had thrown out were all shattered in an instant. What kind of strength is this? Seeing that their wind blades were easily destroyed by Chu Fengyan's finger, the 9 wind-soaring sect elders' eyes were filled with horror. The 9 elders of the Soaring Wind sect were the best of the half-step celestial being realm in the Soaring Wind Star area. They were experts who had been famous in the Soaring Wind Star area for a long time. Now, the 9 of them were so vulnerable in front of Chu Fengyan. They now understood that they had underestimated Chu Fengyan. Retreat. Use the power of the sect's grand array. Deal with this person. The 9 wind-soaring sect elders suddenly retreated. From their palms, a jade talisman suddenly shot out. The moment the jade talisman was shot out, a grand array rose up from the mountains under their feet. This grand array was the mountain protection array of the wind-soaring sect. Wind soaring destroys the world. The 9 wind-soaring sect elders roared at the same time. Their strength was injected into the mountain protection array. Suddenly, the power of the mountain protection array erupted. It fell from the sky and blasted towards Chu Fengyan. Go to hell. Chu Fengyan's face was expressionless when he saw the mountain protection array descending. A stream of dragon power burst out from Chu Fengyan's body. A huge war dragon claw appeared behind Chu Fengyan. The moment the battle dragon claw was formed, it suddenly slammed towards the great protective mountain array that was descending from the sky. Bam! With a loud explosion, the two forces collided in the air. The Fengling sect's mountain protection array was shattered by the war dragon's claw. The 9 elders of the wind-soaring sect were sent flying. Blood spurted out from their mouths as they looked at Chu Fengyan in horror, as if they were looking at a monster. With the 9 of them working together and the power of the mountain protection array of the wind-soaring sect, It could be said that even a true celestial realm expert would have to retreat. It was impossible for the mountain protection array to be shattered in one blow. The protective mountain array was destroyed, and many of the disciples of the 5 great sects below were killed by the aftershocks. Chu Fengmian's expression was indifferent. This time, he came to attack the 5 major sections. Naturally, he would not let anyone go. It did not matter if these disciples died. Anyway, the people of the 5 major sects deserved to die. Chu Fengmian looked at the 9 elders of the Fengling sect. The 9 elders were severely injured, and their faces were extremely pale. When they saw Chu Fengmian looking at them, they were shocked. When they saw Chu Fengmian looking at them, the 9 wind-soaring sect elders suddenly felt a sense of fear in their hearts. They turned around and fled without looking back. The escape lights of the 9 elders were pushed to the extreme in an attempt to escape. They no longer had the courage to face Chu Fengmian. However, Chu Fengmian looked at the 9 wind-soaring sect elders and shouted. The world's edge sword case suddenly opened behind Chu Fengmian. Tens of thousands of sword chis flew out from it. These sword chis tore through the void at an extremely fast speed. End of chapter. Chapter 2088. All right. Hearing Chu Fengmian's words, Han Yueli and Luo Shi's eyes instantly turned serious. A saber and a sword were suddenly unsheathed from their hands. Saber and sword, a mortal weapon, unsheathed. When they were fighting with Qing Fengzi and the Thunder Hall's Mountain Master, Han Yueli and Luo, she did not use the saber and sword, a mortal weapon, because they wanted to hone their strength and familiarize themselves with it. The quality of this pair of saber and sword immortal artifacts had already surpassed ordinary immortal artifacts. If Han Yueli and Luo, she had taken out this pair of saber and sword immortal artifacts at the beginning, they wouldn't have been at a disadvantage at the beginning. But this time, Han Yueli and Luo, she followed Chu Fengmian to hone their strength. Using the saber and sword immortal weapon at the start was a bit of a waste of time. Now, in order to end the battle quickly, Han Yueli and Luo, she did not hesitate to use the saber and sword immortal weapon. The moment the saber and sword immortal weapon were unsheathed, the dazzling saber and sword immortal weapon swept across the entire pocket dimension. The dazzling saber and sword immortal weapon were so dazzling that people could not open their eyes. The moment the saber and sword immortal weapon were unleashed, the power was so strong that nothing could withstand the saber and sword immortal weapon. Qing Fengzi and the Thunder Hall's Mountain Master, who were still fighting with Han Yueli and Luo Shi, were stunned. When the saber and sword immortal weapon suddenly slashed towards them, the two of them could not react in time. The moment Qing Fengzi sensed the sword immortal weapon slashing towards him, he had already retreated. He wanted to dodge it, but his escape light was simply too slow compared to the sword immortal weapon. In an instant, the sword immortal weapon had already slashed onto Qing Fengzi's body. Qing Fengzi's spiritual weapon long robe was instantly torn apart by the sword immortal weapon. The spiritual weapon long robe on Qing Fengzi was also a heaven-grade spiritual weapon, but in front of the sword immortal weapon, it was as weak as a thin sheet of paper and was torn apart. That wasn't the end. After the sword light cut through Qing Fengzi's robe, it slashed towards the horsetail whisk in Qing Fengzi's hand. Although the horsetail whisk was a quasi-immortal artifact, it was still unable to withstand a single blow from a true immortal artifact. Gotcha! The horsetail whisk was cut in half and shattered into pieces. A half-immortal artifact was mercilessly destroyed by the sword light. Immortal item? How could this be? How can you have an immortal weapon? Qing Fengzi only regained his senses when the horsetail whisk in his hand was broken. He looked at Han Yueli in disbelief and said, "Immortal weapons were precious treasures that not even peak celestial realm and immortal general realm experts could possess." He had never imagined that Han Yueli would have an immortal artifact in his possession. Looking at Qing Fengzi's doubt, Han Yueli did not reply. Instead, she wielded the immortal sword and executed the Ice Lotus sword technique. The tip of the sword flashed, and ice lotuses bloomed wherever the tip of the sword passed. Each of these ice lotuses contained an unparalleled killing sword light. Han Yueli's strength was vastly different from before when she used the immortal sword. Hiss, 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 hiss. The ice lotuses collided with Qing Fengzi's body. Qing Fengzi did not have any strength to retaliate at all. Initially, when he faced Han Yueli, he was already at a disadvantage. Moreover, Han Yueli wielded the immortal sword, and her strength was twice as strong as before. Qing Fengzi was no longer a match for Han Yueli. Die. After exchanging a few blows, Qing Fengzi's body was filled with wounds. He could not hold on any longer. Han Yueli did not give Qing Fengzi any chance to take a breather. At the moment when Qing Fengzi was forced into a corner, Han Yueli unsheathed her sword. An icy blue sword suddenly slashed across the void and landed on Qing Fengzi's chest. Puff! Blood spurted out. Qing Fengzi's body was completely destroyed by this sword. At the same time, his essence blood had nowhere to run. Han Yueli moved her palm and grabbed. Qing Fengzi's essence blood fell in a Han Yueli's hand. Under the chilling intent, it turned into a blood crystal and was frozen forever. On the other side, after Luo, she unsheathed her immortal longsword. Her strength was rising steadily. The Thunder Hall's mountain master could not hold on any longer after a few rounds. Like Qing Fengzi, he was killed by Luo Shi. The essence blood of the Thunder Hall's mountain master was also in Luo Shi's hand. The two Sky Human Realm old ancestors of the Yin-Yang sect were killed by Han Yueli and Luo Shi just like that. Such a scene caused the disciples of the 5 major sects to be stunned. It took a long time for them to regain their senses. Those were two Sky Human Realm old ancestors. Sky Human Realm old ancestors were existences that had gone through a heaven-defying tribulation and ascended to immortality. They were the overlords of Star Domain. But today they were killed just like that. Even after killing Qing Fengzi and the Thunder Hall's mountain master, Han Yueli and Luo, she did not look tired at all. They seemed to be extremely relaxed. This caused the disciples of the 5 major sects to feel a chill in their hearts. In their hearts, there was already some fear. In their hearts, the 5 major sects had always been invincible. But now, the invincible image of the 5 major sects had disappeared. Since Qing Fengzi and the Thunder Hall's mountain master had died, there were only a few half-step Sky Human Realm elders of the 5 major sects left in this small world. For the current Shu Fengmian, half-step Sky Human Realm old ancestors and demon gods could not arouse the slightest interest in dealing with them. Shu Fengmian's gaze looked towards the sky. It's about time. Several rays of light descended from the sky all of a sudden, revealing several figures. Qing Fengzi, the Thunder Hall's mountain master, is dead? How is this possible? Not good. The mountain guarding array has been broken. So many disciples are dead. Who is so audacious? Kill. The dignity of the 5 major sects shall not be challenged. When these figures arrived, they had all seen what had just happened. Their voices were filled with boundless anger. However, these figures were still in a state of chaos. Their original appearance could not be seen. Although they had descended into this small world, their original bodies were hidden, pretending to be mysterious. Come out, Chu Fengmian shouted coldly. Suddenly, he waved his hand, and a surge of spiritual energy was injected into the void. Rumble. These figures suddenly trembled. It seemed that the original bodies of these figures were forced out from the depths of the void. First, set a small target. For example, 1 second. Remember, Bookhouse. Chapter 2089. These celestial human realm patriarchs of the 5 major sects hurried back when they sensed that someone was attacking this pocket world. However, they also wanted to find out who was attacking the lair of the 5 major sections. That was why they hid their true bodies and descended with their avatars. Their true bodies were hidden in the depths of the void and could move freely. In this way, if they encountered a strong enemy, they could escape unscathed. At worst, they could just abandon the 5 major sections. This could also be considered as a surefire preparation. Unexpectedly, Chu Fengmian went directly into the depths of the void and locked onto the auras of the patriarchs of the 5 major sections. A blast of spiritual power blasted out and forced the 7 celestial human realm patriarchs of the 5 major sects out. Now, all of them had descended with their true bodies. 7 overbearing auras, 7 celestial human realm experts. They descended at the same time. For a moment, the overbearing power was about to tear everyone in front of them apart. Yin Yang Sect Master, 9 Sons Emperor Wu, Yi Wuchang, 100 Beasts Emperor, Zanga Buddha, Heavenly General Iron Blood, Black Tiger Demon Ancestor. Chu Fengmian looked at the figures in front of him and immediately knew the identity of these people in his mind. These people were all invincible experts who were famous in a star field. The weakest one was an expert who had stepped into the celestial human realm for 1,000 years. His strength was already incomparably strong. As for the most powerful one, 100 Beasts Emperor, he had already stepped into the immortal warrior realm. He was also the only immortal warrior among the 7 people present. The strength of the 5 major sects could be said to be extremely terrifying. 7 celestial human realm experts, even if they went to a second-class star field, could establish a giant force. Even if they went to the 3 great saint realms, they would have a foothold. Han Yueli and Luo, she had already killed 2 celestial human realm experts, Qing Fengzi and the Thunderhall Master. Otherwise, there were now a total of 9 celestial human realm experts in the 5 major sections. These 5 major sects were all giants of Starfield. Now that they had united and formed an alliance of 5 major sects, their strength was extremely overbearing. Lord Slayer had speculated that there should be 5 celestial realm experts among the 5 major sections. But now, it seemed that the strength of the 5 major sects was far beyond Lord Slayer's imagination. It seems that if they didn't know the true situation of the Sword Dao School, they would have made their move long ago. Seeing the strength of the 5 great sects, Chu Fengmian was somewhat shocked. At the same time, he was somewhat glad that he had rushed back quickly. Previously, when the 5 major sects decided to make a move against the Sword Dao sect, they were only testing the waters in the beginning. After all, the 9 domains had once been sacred domains. Just like the 7 great sects of the 9 domains, they all had extremely deep foundations. Therefore, many warriors from other star domains did not dare to act rashly. Previously, the 5 major sects had sent their disciples to the North region to massacre the Sword Dao sect. This was also a test. If this test succeeded, the 5 major sects would truly attack the Sword Dao sect. Although the current Sword Dao sect strength was not what it used to be, it was far from being able to withstand the attacks of 9 celestial realm experts. If Chu Fengmian hadn't come back in time, the Sword Dao sect would have been reduced to ruins a few days later. Thinking of this, Chu Fengmian's eyes revealed boundless killing intent. Since he had rushed back this time, he would solve the problem of the 5 major sects in one fell swoop. Moreover, Chu Fengmian wanted to use the 5 major sects to establish his prestige and let the name of the Sword Dao sect resound throughout the 9 domains. Boy, I remember you. You are the one who killed this Emperor's incarnation. You are the sect master of the Sword Dao sect? Suddenly, the 9 Sons Emperor Wu's gaze fell on Chu Fengmian. From his eyes, there was a cold, killing intent. Previously, Chu Fengmian had destroyed his incarnation, which had affected his strength. This grudge must be avenged. Boy, you're arrogant enough to dare to come here. Today, you will not leave here alive. Yi Wuchang snorted coldly as he stared at Chu Fengmian. Previously, his incarnation was also killed by Chu Fengmian. You dare to kill my incarnation? Today, I must capture you and refine you into my slave to make up for my loss. As Yi Wuchang spoke, he took a step forward. It's nothing to kill a few incarnations. You want to refine me into a slave? You really don't know your place. Chu Fengmian glanced at the crowd and said without hesitation. The 7 celestial realm patriarchs saw his disdainful gaze, and their eyes were filled with anger. A puny half-step celestial realm martial artist dared to look down on them? This was a puny human challenging the majesty of the immortals. Just the 2 of you are too weak. You are not worth my time. All of you come meet together. Don't waste my time. Chu Fengyan said casually as he stood with his hands behind his back. His expression was incomparably relaxed as he looked at the 7 celestial realm patriarchs. A stone startled 1,000 ripples. Hearing Chu Fengyan's words, the 7 celestial realm patriarchs could no longer endure the anger in their hearts. Arrogant, you don't know your place. Someone kill him quickly. Let me. Suddenly, a vicious voice sounded. It was Yi Wuchang. You sharp-tongued brat, die. I'd like to see if you can continue talking after you die. Boom! Yi Wuchang took a step forward and stared at Chu Fengyan. He could not help but attack first. As soon as he attacked, the entire sky turned into darkness. All the darkness turned into a giant dark palm that fell from the sky. All the light was covered by the palm. Giant dark palm. Yi Wuchang's incarnation had used this move in the Sword Origin world. However, at that time, Yi Wuchang was only an incarnation after all. His strength was less than 1%. Yi Wuchang was in his original form. The power that he unleashed was also his full strength. In an instant, endless spiritual energy gathered on his palm and blasted it down. In the darkness, it was as if the world was collapsing. There was no longer a trace of light in the world. The power of darkness gathered around Chu Fengyan. It seemed to be suppressing Chu Fengyan in the center of the darkness, making it impossible for Chu Fengyan to rise. He could only be suppressed by the eternal darkness. Child's play. Chu Fengyan looked disdainful when he saw the darkness that was gathering to suppress him. Suddenly, he moved his right hand and turned it into a claw. It turned into the claw of a war dragon and tore it apart. Chapter 2090. Chu Fengyan suddenly made a move. His right hand turned into a war dragon's claw and swept across. It was the first move of the primogenitor's first move. Right now, Chu Fengyan had complete control over the first 6 styles of the 9 moves of the primogenitor. It could even be said that the profoundness that Chu Fengyan was displaying right now wasn't far from the profoundness that the real primogenitor sky dragon could display. Chu Fengyan could perform the 9 moves of the primogenitor with a raise of his hand. This war dragon claw was 1,000 feet long. As the claw struck out, it tore apart the heavens and earth. As it struck into the boundless darkness, a crack was forcefully torn open in the boundless darkness. Boom! This crack was just the beginning. Soon after, the entire boundless darkness collapsed. Yi Wuchang's giant palm of darkness was instantly shattered when it collided with a war dragon's claw in the sky. An immortal realm warrior was nothing in Chu Fengyan's eyes. Puff! Yi Wuchang had never imagined that Chu Fengyan's attack would be so terrifying. He had condensed all of his strength to form a giant black palm, but it had been shattered just like that. The rebounding force bombarded his chest, causing him to retreat abruptly. He spat out a large amount of blood and was seriously injured. He actually repelled Yi Wuchang with a single move. How can a little guy in the half-step celestial realm have such terrifying power? God, how is this possible? Could it be that this guy is a super genius from one of the Saint Realms? Only the super geniuses of the 3 great Saint Realms can have such strength. The remaining experts of the celestial realm from the 5 major sects looked at Yi Wuchang, who was seriously injured and forced to retreat. Their eyes were full of disbelief and shock. The gap between the half-step celestial realm and the celestial realm could be said to be the difference between an immortal and a mortal. The gap between these 2 realms was greater than any of the previous realms. A half-step celestial realm expert who could contend with a celestial realm expert was qualified to be called a genius. But now, Chu Fengyan did not only contend with a celestial realm expert, but also sent Yi Wuchang flying with a single move. Yi Wuchang was not a match for Chu Fengyan's move. This kind of strength caused everyone to be endlessly shocked. Even Hanyu Li and Luo, she were dumbfounded by this scene. Although they knew that Chu Fengyan's strength was not as simple as it looked, they did not expect that a celestial realm expert would be so vulnerable in front of Chu Fengyan. This guy is monstrous. The celestial realm expert, who was the most tyrannical one among the celestial realm experts, who had stepped into the immortal realm, immortal, looked at Fengmian's, looked ferocious. Even he felt that Chu Fengmian's strength was somewhat troublesome. Fengmian's SSS kill him. 100 Beast Emperor's eyes fell on Chu Fengmian. His eyes were filled with killing intent. He suddenly roared and immediately took the lead to attack. Two huge figures emerged beside 100 Beast Emperor. These two huge figures were tigers that were 100 feet tall. There was a divine rune on the tiger's head that seemed to be formed naturally. Divine Striped Tiger, the royal family of the Tiger Clan. Chu Fengmian was a little surprised to see the divine runes on the heads of the two tigers that were over 100 zhang tall. The Tiger Clan was also a big clan among the monster clans. Although it could not be compared with the Divine Elephant Clan and the Ancient Battle Dragon Clan, it was still one of the top clans among the monster clans. The Divine Striped Tiger was the royal family of the Tiger Clan. Its status in the Tiger Clan was not inferior to the Ancient Battle Dragon and the Dragon Clan. Devour. 100 Beast Sect was famous for their beast-taming Dao. 100 Beast Emperor, who had stepped into the peak of the beast-taming Dao, had actually subdued two divine striped tigers. Especially these two divine striped tigers. They were both celestial realm immortal beasts. Their strength had reached the peak of the immortal realm. Among the 5 major sects, the 100 Beast sect seemed to be the leader. This was because the 100 Beasts Emperor alone was equivalent to 3 celestial realm experts. The two divine striped tigers had long been subdued by the myriad beast Great Emperor. Following his command, they roared and charged at Chu Fengmian. Boundless demonic power suddenly burst out from the divine rune on their heads, turning into 2 divine lights that bombarded Chu Fengmian. The most powerful part of the divine striped tigers was the divine rune on their heads. The divine rune on their heads was a divine ability that was cultivated by an invincible expert of the Tiger Clan in the ancient times. This divine ability was passed down through the bloodline, generation after generation, and finally became the divine Striped Tiger Clan. The divine light that burst out from the divine rune was almost invincible in the same realm. Even a demon god of the same realm would be severely injured if not killed by the divine light. At the same time, not only the 2 divine striped tigers, but 100 Beast Emperor also made his move. A long staff appeared in his hand, flowing with immortal power. It was an immortal tool. 100 Beast Emperor actually had an immortal tool. Among the 5 major sects, 100 Beast Emperor was the most terrifying one. With his strength in the immortal warrior realm, this long staff could unleash the most terrifying power in his hands. The long staff fell down, shattering the heaven and earth as it smashed towards Chu Fengmian. With the 2 divine striped tigers and 100 Beast Emperor attacking personally, even if his opponent was a true celestial realm expert, he would still be dead for sure. The 2 divine lights sealed off Chu Fengmian's escape route, leaving him with no way out. At the same time, the long staff fell from the sky and smashed towards Chu Fengmian. Is this the strength of 100 Beast Emperor? It's too terrifying. This kid is dead for sure. 9 Sons Emperor Wu, Iron Blood Heavenly General, Black Tiger Demonic Ancestor, and the others exclaimed at the strength of 100 Beast Emperor while looking at Chu Fengmian with a cold smile. Under the full power of 100 Beast Emperor, any one of them would die without a doubt, let alone Chu Fengmian, who was only a half-step celestial realm expert. In their eyes, the moment the long staff fell on Chu Fengmian would be the moment of his death. Not bad, you have some strength, but you're still far from being able to kill me. This immortal tool is not bad. I'll take it. Chu Fengmian looked at the descending immortal weapon long staff and suddenly stood up. With a wave of his hand, he abruptly rushed towards the descending immortal weapon long staff and grabbed it. Chapter 2091. What is he trying to do? Stopping an immortal weapon with his bare hands? Is this kid crazy? Is he tired of living? He's digging his own grave. 9 Sons Emperor Wu, Heavenly General Tai Shui, and the others were stunned. They couldn't understand Chu Fengmian's actions. Stopping an immortal weapon with his bare hands, and an immortal weapon wielded by an immortal warrior? No matter how resilient one's body was, death was inevitable. It was especially so when Heavenly General Tai Shui was a celestial realm cultivator of the way of body refinement. But even he didn't dare to stop an immortal weapon with his bare hands. It was no different from courting death. Only a madman would choose to do that. No, even a madman wouldn't do that. Courting death? The 100 Beasts' great emperor revealed a sinister smile as he watched Chu Fengmian's actions. More immortal runes emerged on the staff as it fell. The power that the immortal weapon had displayed earlier on was just a probing attack. Right now, this was the full strength of the immortal weapon. Boundless might descended at the same time, as though it was going to shatter the entire heaven and earth. But Chu Fengmian still stood there, ready to take the immortal weapon's attack with his bare hands. Boom! The immortal weapon smashed down fiercely. At the same time, the two divine rune tigers gathered their power and blasted out divine light. It was equivalent to the combined attack of 3 celestial realm experts. Now, all of them bombarded Chu Fengmian's body. At the center of this power, it seemed that no one could withstand it, no matter how powerful they were. He's dead. Nine Suns Emperor Wu only glanced at Chu Fengmian's direction, then his gaze changed. In his heart, Chu Fengmian was already a dead man. His gaze was no longer on Chu Fengmian. Instead, it landed on Hanyue Li and Luo Shi. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Since that brat is dead, the two of you will definitely die today. Jiuyang, you don't have to do anything. Leave these two little guys to me. It just so happens that I need a few servants to serve me. Being able to subdue 2 celestial realm warriors and make them my servants is not bad. The Black Tiger Demon race's gaze also landed on Hanyue Li and Luo Shi. His eyes were filled with viciousness. Although the other celestial realm experts did not speak, their gazes all fell on Hanyue Li and Luo Shi. They surrounded the 2 women and trapped them in the center. Oomph. Seeing that they were trapped, Hanyue Li and Luo Shi snorted coldly. They didn't say anything, but they took out their immortal weapons and gathered their spiritual energy, ready to attack at any time. 2 immortal artifacts. Seeing the immortal weapons in Hanyue Li and Luo Shi's hands, the celestial realm experts of the 5 major sects were jealous and greedy. Among the celestial realm experts of the 5 major sects, only the 100 Beasts Emperor had an immortal artifact. Although they were all experts who had been famous for a long time, they didn't have the opportunity to obtain an immortal artifact. Hanyue Li and Luo Shi's aura was unstable. It was obvious that they had just broken through. How could they not be jealous that they could obtain an immortal artifact right after breaking through? Now, some people couldn't wait any longer. They were eager to kill Hanyue Li and Luo Shi and take the 2 immortal artifacts for themselves. Oh, my immortal artifact! My immortal artifact! What's going on? Just when everyone's attention was on Hanyue Li and Luo Shi, another exclamation was heard. It was the voice of the 1,000 Beasts Emperor. 9 Suns Emperor Wu and the others hurriedly looked at the 1,000 Beasts Emperor and saw an unbelievable scene. The long-staff immortal weapon in the 1,000 Beasts Emperor's hand suddenly flew out of his hand. The connection between the long-staff immortal weapon and the 1,000 Beasts Emperor was suddenly cut off. After the long-staff immortal weapon flew out, it flew into the center of the energy and fell into the hands of a figure. Everyone's eyes widened when they saw this figure. For a moment, they were unable to believe what they were seeing in front of their eyes. He's not dead. How is this possible? He blocked the power of an immortal artifact with his bare hands. He's not dead. This figure was Chu Fengmian, who everyone thought was a dead man. Boundless demonic energy burst out from the divine runes above their heads, turning into 2 beams of divine light that shot towards Chu Fengmian. The most powerful thing about the striped divine tiger was the divine runes on their heads. These divine runes were created by an invincible expert of the tiger tribe in the ancient times. These divine runes were passed down from generation to generation through the bloodline. Eventually, the striped divine tiger tribe was formed. The divine light that burst out from the divine runes was almost invincible in the same realm. Even martial artists and demonic immortals in the same realm would be injured if they didn't die from the divine light. At the same time, the 100 Beasts Emperor also made his move. A long staff appeared in his hand. Immortal energy flowed on the staff. It was an immortal artifact. The 100 Beasts Emperor actually had an immortal artifact. Among the 5 major sects, the 100 Beasts Emperor was the most terrifying one. With his strength as an immortal warrior, the immortal artifact could unleash the most terrifying power in his hands. The staff fell down, shattering heaven and earth as it smashed towards Chu Fengyan, with the 2 divine rune tigers and the 100 Beasts Emperor attacking personally. Even if his opponent was a true celestial realm martial artist, he would still die without a doubt. The 2 beams of divine light sealed off Chu Fengyan's escape route. At the same time, the immortal artifact staff fell from the sky and smashed towards Chu Fengyan. Is this the strength of the 100 Beasts Emperor? How terrifying. This kid is going to die for sure. 9 Suns Emperor Wu, Iron Blood Heavenly General, Black Tiger Demonic Ancestor, and the others exclaimed at the strength of the 100 Beasts Emperor while sneering at Chu Fengyan. Under the full power of the 100 Beasts Emperor, any one of them would die without a doubt, let alone Chu Fengyan, who was only a half-step celestial realm martial artist. In their eyes, the moment the immortal artifact staff fell would be the moment of Chu Fengyan's death. Not bad, you have some strength, but you're far from qualified to kill me. This immortal artifact is not bad. I'll take it. Chu Fengyan looked at the descending immortal artifact staff and suddenly stood up. With a wave of his hand, he rushed towards the falling immortal artifact staff and grabbed it. First, set a small target, such as 1 second. Remember, Book Abode. Chapter 2092. Even for a celestial realm powerhouse, obtaining a celestial artifact was an extremely difficult task. The 100 Beast Emperor had gone through a lot of trouble to obtain this immortal weapon. He couldn't allow Chu Fengyan to take it away from him. Asterisk rumble. Asterisk the 100 Beasts' great emperor attacked in anger. Boundless fury poured out along with his strength, erupting with unparalleled power. The power of the immortal warrior realm erupted incisively and vividly. All of it condensed on his fist wind, blasting towards Chu Fengyan. 100 Beast Divine Fist. Countless figures of demonic beasts could be vaguely seen within the fist wind. Even if figures of some ancient divine beasts could be seen within the fist wind. This was the 100 Beast Emperor's 100 Beast Divine Fist. He had subdued countless demonic beasts and comprehended a supreme divine fist from them. It had reached the level of an immortal art. The fist came crashing down towards Chu Fengyan from the sky. An incomparably great pressure came from the sky, locking onto Chu Fengyan. Although the 100 Beast Emperor had lost his staff immortal weapon, he had used all his trump cards in his fury. His punch was even stronger than the staff immortal weapon's attack. With one punch, heaven and earth collapsed, and the surrounding space shattered. Even the space around this small world was unable to withstand the power of this punch and began to shatter. Die! In addition to the 100 Beast Martial Monarch, the leader of the Yin and Yang Gate, the 9 Suns Martial Monarch, Zengabuda, the Heavenly General of Iron Blood, the Black Tiger Martial Progenitor, and even Yi Wuchang, who was injured by Chu Fengyan, had recovered too. They immediately attacked Chu Fengyan. 7 celestial realm experts besieged Chu Fengyan, trying to kill him. Chu Fengyan's strength was unfathomable to them. Boundless killing intent erupted and shrouded Chu Fengyan's body. Following it were a series of unbeatable killing moves. Dragon Whale, Sea Splitting Fist. Chu Fengyan gathered his strength and attacked at the same time. He clenched his right hand into a fist and punched out. Behind Chu Fengyan, 2 incomparably huge phantoms suddenly appeared and condensed together with Chu Fengyan's punch. The 2 enormous figures were none other than Tianlong and Xianjing, the 2 great Khanate divine beasts. Chu Fengyan had previously combined the power of the Dragon Whale to create the Dragon Whale Sea-Splitting Fist. However, the power of this fist was only comparable to an ordinary immortal technique. It was nothing compared to the countless immortal techniques that Chu Fengmian knew. However, Chu Fengmian's fortuitous encounter in the Songhai star system had led him to obtain the horn of the black whale from the black whale hidden treasure. Chu Fengmian had then integrated the horn into his body, allowing him to control the power of the primordial origin and the black whale. Now, Chu Fengmian's dragon whale sea-shattering fist was unleashed with the combined power of the ancestral sky dragon and the black whale, the two connate divine beasts. In this world, only Chu Fengmian, who controlled both the power of the progenitor sky dragon and the power of the mysterious whale, had the ability to unleash such a punch. This punch was created by Chu Fengmian himself, but its current power was no less than the first 6 forms of the progenitor's 9 forms. Rumble. The dragon whale, sea-splitting fist collided with the countless killing moves in the air. The first to bear the brunt was the fist wind of the 100 Beast Emperor. In an instant, the 100 Beast Divine Fist of the 100 Beast Emperor was mercilessly crushed. In the next moment, the killing moves of the remaining 6 Celestial Realm experts were all shattered by the dragon whale, sea-splitting fist. Puff! The 7 Celestial Realm experts were all sent flying for dozens of miles. They barely managed to maintain their figures and came to a stop. Each of them spat out a mouthful of blood. How is this possible? Am I crazy? How is this possible? 7 Celestial Realm ancestors. 7 Celestial Realm immortals were repelled by him alone. This is impossible. It's impossible. The disciples of the 5 sects below all raised their heads and looked at the battle in the sky. Seeing that the 7 experts in the Celestial Realm were all sent flying by Chu Fengmian's punch, everyone's eyes were filled with disbelief and shock. Even many Emperor Realm and Emperor Gu's disciples of the 5 great sects wondered if they were crazy to see such a scene. In their eyes, a Celestial Realm expert was a lofty and invincible existence. In the extraterritorial starry sky, a Celestial Realm expert could easily rule a 3rd-grade star area and be the overlord of the universe. There were 7 Celestial Realm experts in front of them, including the 1,000 Beast Emperor, who was an invincible figure who had stepped into the immortal warrior realm. But these invincible figures were all sent flying by Chu Fengmian with a single punch. Chu Fengmian was still standing in the same place, not moving a single step. He looked calm and casual as if he had just attacked casually. This is impossible. How can a half-step Celestial Realm expert be so terrifying? 9 Suns Emperor Wu was sent flying. He looked in the direction of Chu Fengmian from afar and said in horror. The confidence on his face had completely disappeared and was replaced by fear. In his eyes, Chu Fengmian was just a little guy who was half a step into the celestial being realm, an ant. No matter how strong Chu Fengmian was, he was just a slightly bigger ant in his eyes. But in this confrontation, Chu Fengmian's strength made him feel that he could not resist. Not only him, but Heaven General Tai Shui, the Yin-Yang sect master, and the others also looked at Chu Fengmian in horror, as if they were looking at a monster. Their mouths were wide open, but they could not say a word. To be able to take this punch, it seems like you guys are not a bunch of trash. You have some strength, Chu Fengmian said with an indifferent expression. As he spoke, an incomparably huge dragon claw appeared behind him. Since you've taken down a punch, let's take this palm. Boom! The dragon claw behind Chu Fengmian condensed in an instant and descended from the sky, sweeping down. The might of this dragon claw was the power of the first 6 moves of the primogeniture. All of them were integrated into it. Boundless dragon power surged and turned into the shape of ancient battle dragons. In an instant, thousands of dragons roared and were invincible. It was as if the scene had returned to the ancient times, when the dragon clan was invincible. Under the encirclement of the dragons, the battle dragon claw slammed down fiercely. Chapter 2093. Chu Fengmian was so quick that the 100-beast martial monarch, the 9 Suns Emperor Wu, and the others could not react in time. In their view, Chu Fengmian had just used such a killer move, so he would need to stop for a moment to recover his spiritual power. To their surprise, Chu Fengmian did not give them any time to catch their breaths. As soon as the dragon whale sea-shattering fist finished its attack, the battle dragon claw appeared and slammed down fiercely from the sky. Activate the power of all the formations. The 100-beast martial monarch was the first to react. He let out a roar. The 9 sons, Emperor Wu, Yi Wucheng, Heavenly General Tai Shui, and the others finally calmed their thoughts and unleashed their energy. This boundless spiritual energy was injected into every corner of this small world. Instantly, countless great arrays rose up. Since the 5 great sects were going to establish their headquarters in this pocket dimension, they were naturally well prepared. They had already set up countless formations in the pocket dimension. Under the control of the 9 sons, Emperor Wu, Yi Wucheng, and the others, numerous great arrays were awakened from the ground and appeared in the sky. They immediately flew out and arrived in front of everyone. There were a few hundred of these formations, which the 100-beast martial monarch and the others had set up in advance to deal with their enemies. The formations combined into one and formed an invincible defense before the battle dragon claw in an attempt to resist the attack. A few hundred formations? Even a few thousand formations won't be able to save you. Break! Chu Fumian waved his hand and slammed it down. The power of the battle dragon's claw was pushed to the maximum. As it slammed down, the countless ancient battle dragons that were surrounding the battle dragon's claw shattered one after another, turning into extremely pure dragon force. In an instant, all of the dragon force merged into the battle dragon's claw and slammed down on the hundreds of formations. Rumble. In an instant, countless formations within the invincible defense formed by hundreds of great formations were shattered. Countless cracks appeared within the hundreds of formations. Even the invincible defense formed by the formations could not resist the power of the battle dragon claw. Break! Chu Fumian uttered a roar. The illusionary figure of the first ancestor Tianlong behind him suddenly came alive. Following a loud dragon roar, the illusionary figure of the first ancestor Tianlong suddenly flew into the battle dragon claw. The power of the battle dragon claw increased tremendously after the illusionary figure of the first ancestor Tianlong merged with it. Bang! The countless cracks on the invincible defense formed by hundreds of formations were shattered at the same time. The hundreds of formations were completely destroyed, unable to withstand the power of the battle dragon's claw. How terrifying! Is he still a human? The emperor, the 9 sons, Emperor Wu, and the others looked at Chu Fumian. Worse eyes were filled with fear. None of them dared to stand a chance against Chu Fumian anymore. They looked at each other, and without the need for any words, the 7 celestial realm powerhouses suddenly took a step back at the same time, turning into 7 streaks of light that fled in all directions. These 7 Deva realm powerhouses were actually going to flee. They had decided to give up on the 5 major sects in this pocket world. Although the 5 major sects were their painstaking efforts, for these experts in the celestial realm, their own survival was the most important thing. Experts in the celestial realm had a long lifespan. As long as they put in the effort, they could still establish such 5 major sections. To them, the destruction of the 5 major sects was nothing. Their lives were more important. The speed of the streaks of light was pushed to the limit. The 7 celestial realm experts were sent flying for dozens of miles. They barely managed to stabilize themselves and came to a stop. Each of them coughed out a mouthful of blood. What? How is this possible? Am I crazy? How is this possible? 7 celestial realm ancestors. 7 celestial realm immortals were defeated by him alone? This is impossible. Absolutely impossible. The disciples of the 5 great sects below all raised their heads and watched the battle in the sky. Seeing that the 7 experts in the celestial realm were all sent flying by Chu Fumian's punch, everyone's eyes were filled with disbelief and shock. Even many Emperor Realm and Emperor Gu's disciples of the 5 major sects wondered if they were crazy to see such a scene. In their eyes, a celestial realm expert was a lofty and invincible existence. In the extraterritorial starry sky, a celestial realm expert could easily rule a 3rd-grade star area and be the overlord of the universe. There were 7 celestial realm experts in front of them. Even the thousand-beast Great Emperor was an invincible figure who had stepped into the immortal warrior realm. But these invincible figures were all sent flying by Chu Fengyan with one punch. Even Chu Fengyan was still standing in the same place. He looked calm and casual, as if he had just attacked casually. This is impossible. How can the strength of a half-step celestial realm expert be so terrifying? Nine Suns Emperor Wu was sent flying. He looked at Chu Fengyan from afar and said in horror. The confidence on his face had completely disappeared and was replaced by fear. In his eyes, Chu Fengyan was just a little guy who was half a step into the celestial being realm, an ant. No matter how strong Chu Fengyan was, he was just a slightly bigger ant in his eyes. But in this confrontation, Chu Fengyan's strength made him feel that he could not resist. Not only him, but Heaven General Tai Shui, the Yin-Yang sect master, and the others were also looking at Chu Fengyan in horror, as if they were looking at a monster. Their mouths were wide open, but they could not say a word. Since you can take this punch, it seems that you are not a bunch of trash. You have some strength, Chu Fengyan said, with an indifferent expression. As he spoke, an incomparably huge dragon claw appeared behind him. Since you have taken one punch, let's take this palm. Boom! The dragon claw on Chu Fengyan's back was formed in an instant. It descended from the sky and swept down. The might of this dragon claw was the power of the first 6 moves of the primogenitor. All of them were integrated into it. Boundless dragon power surged and turned into the shape of ancient battle dragons. In an instant, tens of thousands of dragons roared and were invincible. It was as if the scene of the invincible era of the Dragon Clan was restored. Under the encirclement of the dragons, the battle dragon claw slammed down fiercely. Chapter 2094. However, what surprised Chu Fengyan was that this Nine Suns Emperor Wu was actually a member of the Alliance of 100 Extremes. He should be one of the ancestors. Chu Fengyan alone was still unable to contend against the Alliance of 100 Extremes. However, as Chu Fengyan thought about it, the killing intent in his eyes intensified. So what if this Nine Suns Emperor Wu was a member of the Alliance of 100 Extremes? This was an incomparably hidden, small world in the depths of the void of the 9 domains. Now that Chu Fengyan had killed Nine Suns Emperor Wu, no one would know that it was Chu Fengyan who did it. Moreover, Chu Fengyan wanted to seize the supreme sword energy in Tianxing Jindi's hands. Sooner or later, Chu Fengyan and Tianxing Jindi would have to fight. As the owner of the supreme sword energy, there would definitely be a battle between them, unless one of them was willing to give it up. However, this supreme sword energy was the most precious treasure of the Sword Dao. Who would be willing to give it up? Since he would have to shed all pretense of cordiality with the Alliance of 100 Extremes, sooner or later, it would be the same. So what if you're from the Alliance of 100 Extremes? In the 9 domains, if I kill you, no one will be able to find out. Today, you are destined to die. Chu Fengyan's eyes were filled with boundless killing intent. He pointed his finger. An array of sword energy directly slashed towards Nine Suns Emperor Wu. Die! This ray of sword energy was something that Nine Suns Emperor Wu could not resist. Under this ray of sword energy, Nine Suns Emperor Wu's body immediately exploded, and a bloody mist filled the sky. I am Nine Suns Emperor Wu. I have already stepped into the celestial realm. I'm going to create a prosperous era in the 9 domains. How can I die? Nine Suns Emperor Wu's roar came from the bloody mist that filled the sky. At this time, Nine Suns Emperor Wu was still unwilling to admit his defeat. He was still struggling to escape and make a comeback. But all his struggles were futile. With a thought, Chu Fengyan activated the sky, devouring secret technique. Instantly, the Nine Suns Martial Emperor's blood essence was completely devoured. It was refined by the sky-devouring secret technique and turned into the purest spiritual energy. It was integrated into Chu Fengyan's body and became his power. He killed Nine Suns Emperor Wu. This person is too powerful. What should we do? Yi Wuchang, Heavenly General Ironblood, the Yin-Yang sect master, and the others watched Chu Fengyan kill 9 sons Emperor Wu so easily. Their bodies trembled, and their faces were filled with fear. The 9 sons Emperor Wu was also a celestial realm elite. Those who could survive the great tribulation of the celestial realm were all geniuses among geniuses. Furthermore, they also needed both talent and luck to reach the celestial realm. In any celestial realm, a celestial realm elite would be considered an invincible existence. However, 9 sons Emperor Wu had been killed by Chu Fengyan right in front of them. Many of them were on par with 9 sons Emperor Wu in terms of strength. If Chu Fengyan could kill 9 sons Emperor Wu so easily, it also meant that Chu Fengyan could kill them easily. Especially just now. They had seen how 9 sons Emperor Wu and Yi Wuchang had used all their trump cards. They had exploded with extreme light and escaped into the depths of the void. They had even left the small world far away. However, the 2 of them had still been caught by Chu Fengyan in a single move. This scene made Heavenly General Ironblood, the Yin-Yang sect master, and the others even more afraid. Chu Fengyan was not only powerful, but they were also unable to escape from Chu Fengyan's hands. They seemed to have fallen into a hopeless situation that they could not escape from. 100 Beasts. Heavenly Warrior Tai Shui, the Yin-Yang Gate Master, Yi Wuchang, and the others finally looked at the 100 Beast Emperor. The strongest person present was the 100 Beast Emperor. At this critical moment, they could only respect the 100 Beast Emperor. Sir, it's our fault this time. We've already paid a huge price today. Why don't we all take a step back and settle this matter? 100 Beast Emperor took a step forward, looked at Chu Fengyan, and said calmly, "No matter how strong you are, you're too arrogant to think that you can take on 6 of us at once. If we fight with our lives on the line, you won't have a good ending either. Why don't we all take a step back and leave the 9 regions, and not interfere in the matters of Sword Dao's sect?" 100 Beast Emperor looked at Chu Fengyan. The 2 divine striped tigers beside him were also staring at Chu Fengyan. Chu Fengyan had already accumulated his strength, and he was ready to attack at any time. This negotiation was also the final negotiation. If Chu Fengyan did not agree, the only outcome would be a bloody battle. I've said that I'm here today to annihilate the 5 major sections. Today, no one from the 5 major sects shall live. Chu Fengyan said calmly, glancing at the people in front of him. As for you guys, you're just a bunch of chickens and dogs. What can you do even if you fight with your lives on the line? Chu Fengyan stood with his hands clasped behind his back. His eyes were incomparably indifferent. These celestial realm experts, invincible giants who ruled a star field, in the eyes of Chu Fengyan, were really like clay chickens and pottery dogs, unable to withstand a single blow. Damn it, cut the crap. Fight. The 6 of us can definitely kill him if we fight with our lives on the line. Kill. Kill. Heavenly General Ironblood, Yi Wuchang, Yin-Yang sect master, and the others were enraged by Chu Fengyan's words. They were all invincible overlords who had stepped into the celestial realm. Even in a behemoth like the alliance of top 100-star regions, a celestial realm expert was still an invincible old ancestor, an absolute upper echelon with a respected status. When had he ever been called a chicken or a pottery dog by others? Kid, it seems like you're crazy. Do you want to fight to the death? 100 Beast Great Emperor stared at Chu Fengyan. His eyes were filled with killing intent. He had also changed the way he addressed Chu Fengyan. He could also see that Chu Fengyan had no intention of letting them go today. In this case, any negotiation would be useless. They could only fight to the end. Kill. The 100 Beasts Emperor roared. All 6 of the celestial being emperors struck at the same time, displaying their utmost strength. Each and every one of them unleashed their killer moves. In an instant, the sky was filled with immortal techniques, bombarding towards Chu Fengyan. Martial artists and demon immortals who could step into the celestial being realm had all obtained a few amazing opportunities. They all had trump cards. Many of these secret techniques, once used, could hurt their foundation. Unless it was a last resort, no one was willing to use them. But now, in order to deal with Chu Fengyan, they couldn't care less. The 6 celestial realm experts used their own secret techniques, burning their blood essence and pushing their strength to the extreme. Burning their blood essence meant that they were going to fight to the death. Someone would definitely fall in this battle. They would fight to the death. End of chapter. Chapter 2095. At this moment, the 6 Celestial Realm experts had decided to fight to the death. They knew how terrifying Chu Fengyan was. Chu Fengyan was only a half-step Celestial Realm expert. If a half-step Celestial Realm expert had such terrifying strength, then Chu Fengyan's strength would skyrocket dozens or even hundreds of times when he stepped into the Celestial Realm in the future. Chu Fengyan's strength couldn't be estimated with common sense. No one doubted that Chu Fengyan would step into the Celestial Realm in the future. Chu Fengyan's talent and strength were monstrous to the extreme. It was certain that he would step into the half-step Celestial Realm in the future. At that time, even if they used all their trump cards, they wouldn't be a match for Chu Fengyan. Since they had completely fallen out with Chu Fengyan today, they couldn't let Chu Fengyan go. They couldn't even let Chu Fengyan leave this small world alive today. Today was their only hope to kill Chu Fengyan. The 6 Celestial Realm experts present were all well aware that this time, no one was still hiding their strength, and all of them had used all of their trump cards. 100 Beasts Sacrifice. Supreme Ruler descends. The 100 Beast Great Emperor roared and suddenly sacrificed the 2 divine, striped tigers beside him. The 2 divine, striped tigers exploded, turning into a bloody mist that shrouded around him. The 2 divine, striped tigers were immortal beasts that had stepped into the Celestial Realm. The 100 Beast Great Emperor had spent a lot of effort to subdue the 2 divine, striped tigers. In order to cultivate the 2 divine, striped tigers, he had spent a lot of resources. But today, the 100 Beast Great Emperor was going all out. In order to kill Chu Fengyan, he sacrificed the 2 divine, striped tigers in exchange for power. The bloody mist suddenly condensed and turned into a long river in the sky. The long river had an ancient aura that was faintly emitted from it. The ancient power could be traced back to the most ancient Desolation era. Suddenly, a force flew out from the long river and supported the 100 Beast Great Emperor. Behind the 100 Beast Great Emperor, it turned into an illusory figure. The illusory figure was so blurry that it was difficult to see its original appearance. However, Chu Fengyan saw through the mist and recognized the illusory figure. Sovereign of all beasts, Chu Fengyan's eyes became incomparably serious. This phantom was the first sovereign of the immortal Dao era, the Myriad Beast Sovereign. The 100 Beast Martial Monarch had inherited the succession of the 10,000 Beast Dominator. After sacrificing 2 Heaven Realm Runic Tigers, he was able to retrieve the 10,000 Beast Dominator's power from a distant place. It turned into an illusionary figure that was bestowed upon him. The moment the Sovereign of all Beasts silhouette shrouded the 100 Beast Emperor's back, the 100 Beast Emperor's strength continued to rise. At a glance, the 100 Beast Emperor's strength had already surpassed the Immortal Warrior realm and stepped into the Immortal General realm. His strength was dozens of times stronger than before. Brat, you forced me to use my full strength. You should be proud of yourself for forcing me to this point. You made me pay such a huge price. You must die today. The 100 Beast Emperor glared at Chu Fengyan with murderous intent. The 2 Runic Tigers had always been the 100 Beast Emperor's best helpers. They were also his trump cards. Sacrificing them in exchange for a momentary boost of power meant that he was determined to kill Chu Fengyan. He'd paid such a huge price to kill Chu Fengyan today. Whoosh! As he spoke, the 100 Beast Emperor moved. The Sovereign of all Beasts silhouette followed him like a shadow. Suddenly, the 100 Beast Emperor struck out with a punch. The moment the might of this punch was unleashed, an incomparably ancient power was transmitted from the long river in the sky. The power of that era, that Desolation era, was transmitted from the long river and integrated into this punch. It was as if the punch had transcended thousands of years, breaking through space and attacking Chu Fengyan. Behind the 100 Beast Emperor, the silhouette of the Sovereign of all Beasts attacked at the same time. In fact, the Sovereign of all Beasts punch was even more powerful than the 100 Beast Emperor's punch. The two punches were definitely at the level of an immortal general. In fact, they were even stronger than the punch of an immortal general expert. Not good. Han Yueli and Luo, she trembled when they saw this. The two of them could clearly feel the power of this punch. It was simply not something that a human could contend against. The two girls exchanged a look and infused their power into their swords and sabers. They were ready to attack. No need. However, right at this moment, Chu Fengmian's casual voice was heard. I alone am enough. Chu Fengmian was still relaxed in the face of the 100 Beast Emperor's punch. He took a step forward and waved his hand. Two spiritual swords appeared in his hands. Chu Fengmian's swords were finally unsheathed. The moment the two swords appeared in Chu Fengmian's hands, his aura changed from the inside to the outside. Chu Fengmian was like a sharp blade hidden deep in the scabbard. Only when he unsheathed his sword did the sharp blade finally come out of the scabbard. Whoosh! Chu Fengmian held the two swords. In an instant, a touch of aqua blue appeared on the blades. 6 Directions Mysterious Water Sword. Chu Fengmian shouted and slashed out with the two swords at the same time. At the same time, the water spiritual energy in Chu Fengmian's divine body of ice and fire surged into the swords. The moment the two swords were slashed out, a monstrous wave suddenly appeared in the sky. Out of nowhere, a monstrous wave was formed. The monstrous wave swept through everything, destroying everything in its path. Wherever the waves passed, everything was destroyed. This was the third sword of the first sword art, the 6 Directions Mysterious Water Sword. In the Shanghai Starfield, Chu Fengmian had obtained many opportunities. His strength had improved rapidly. He had also comprehended the third sword of the 9 Mysterious Sword Art, the 6 Directions Mysterious Water Sword. However, ever since Chu Fengmian comprehended this sword, he had never had the chance to use it in a real battle. Ordinary immortals, immortal warriors, and Fey immortals could be defeated with a wave of Chu Fengmian's hand. They weren't qualified to make Chu Fengmian use this move. The 100 Beast Emperor could barely be considered a worthy opponent for Chu Fengmian. Today, he would use him to test the power of this sword. End of chapter. Chapter 2096. The 10,000 zhang tall wave poured down and swept across the sky. The power of the 6 Directions Mysterious Water Sword burst out in an instant. The minor world couldn't withstand it. If Chu Fengmian hadn't sealed the minor world with the life seal in advance, the minor world would have been shattered and its surroundings would have turned into a void. The 10,000 zhang tall wave swept down and collided with the 2 fist winds sent out by the 100 Beast Great Emperor in the sky. Thousands of ripples were stirred up. The power of the 2 fist winds could even kill an immortal general expert if they were careless. The power contained was enough to destroy a continent. However, the huge wave before them was no ordinary wave. Hidden within it were numerous sword lights. The moment the two forces collided, the sword lights and the sword lights within them all erupted. Rumble! Streaks of sword radiance slashed at the 2 fist winds, mercilessly shattering them into pieces. Even the attacks that were comparable or even stronger than an immortal general expert couldn't resist the 6 Directions Mysterious Water Sword. The 2 fist winds were shattered. Bang! The 100 Beast Emperor was sent flying. Behind him, the phantom of the sovereign of all beasts couldn't withstand the power and was shattered into pieces. Chu Fengmian wasn't surprised by the outcome. The 6 Directions Mysterious Water Sword was the first Sword Emperor's sword art. It wasn't something ordinary immortal arts could resist. The first Sword Emperor was an invincible immortal emperor, an overlord of the immortal Dao era. The 6 Directions Mysterious Water Sword was the third form of the first sword art. Its power was terrifying to the extreme. Of course, Chu Fengmian's 6 Directions Mysterious Water Sword was far from comparable to the first Sword Emperor's 6 Directions Mysterious Water Sword. It could only exert 100th or even 1,000th of the first Sword Emperor's strength at his peak. However, even 1,000th of the first Sword Emperor's strength was unstoppable for the 100 Beast Great Emperor. The phantom of the myriad beast ruler he'd created by sacrificing 2 immortal beasts, the divine striped tigers, was shattered by the sword. How is this possible? My strength has surpassed an immortal general. I'm close to the profound heaven realm. How can I not be your match? The 100-beast great emperor was shocked after being sent flying by the sword. He couldn't believe what had just happened. The 100-beast great emperor had used all his trump cards, even sacrificing 2 immortal beasts in exchange for the phantom of the myriad beast ruler. He wanted to kill Chu Fengmian in one blow. However, he didn't expect Chu Fengmian to be hiding his strength. The strength that Chu Fengmian had displayed before was already close to the strength of an immortal general. It was inconceivable for a half-step celestial being realm warrior to have such strength in his eyes. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that Chu Fengmian still had his strength hidden and even possessed such terrifying swordsmanship. All of this was beyond his imagination. Fengmian, immortal general. Chu Fengmian sneered. He didn't waste his breath on the 100-beast great emperor. He took a step forward and rushed towards the 100-beast great emperor. The sword in his hand flashed, and he slashed at the 100-beast great emperor. Chu Fengmian's current strength had surpassed any Fengmian immortal expert in history. However, Chu Fengmian was a heaven-defying existence. He had gone through a heaven-defying tribulation and became a variant of heaven and earth. Now, Chu Fengmian had merged with the bodies of 3 innate divine beasts. His spiritual power contained the power of primordial. This was something that even the invincible Almighty and the sovereigns had never achieved. Chu Fengmian could be said to be the only one in history. Moreover, Chu Fengmian's attainments in sword principle had reached the pinnacle. He had created the 9 regions sword principle. If any of Chu Fengmian's skills were given to a martial artist, that martial artist would be a genius who left his name in the ancient books. However, all of this had happened to Chu Fengmian alone. Moreover, it had raised Chu Fengmian's strength to an unimaginable level. Even though the 100-beast great emperor had sacrificed his immortal beasts to raise his strength to the peak of the immortal general realm, close to the profound heaven realm, Chu Fengmian could still easily kill him. Chu Fengmian sent the 100-beast emperor flying with a single strike. The 100-beast emperor had been able to withstand the 6-way, mysterious water sword's blade because of the beast ruler's projection behind him, which had helped him absorb most of the power. But now, the sovereign of all beast shadow had been shattered and lost its power. Chu Fengmian was going to kill the 100-beast great emperor with a neck slash. Stop him. Kill. The moment Chu Fengmian drew his sword, the remaining 5 celestial realm experts suddenly appeared behind Chu Fengmian and attacked him. The 5 celestial realm experts had teamed up with the 100-beast emperor and were looking for an opportunity to attack when Chu Fengmian was about to kill the 100-beast emperor. They had even attacked Chu Fengmian from behind. They planned to take Chu Fengmian by surprise and kill him. Immortal! Chu Fengmian roared. The 129,600 immortal crystals in his body suddenly formed a formation. It was the power of the immortal secret art that Chu Fengmian had activated. The 129,600 immortal crystals scattered in every corner of Chu Fengmian's body and formed a large formation. When the formation was completed, Chu Fengmian's strength suddenly soared. Looking at the 5 celestial realm experts behind him, Chu Fengmian suddenly turned his sword and swept it across. It was so fast that the 5 celestial realm experts couldn't react in time. They had just closed in on Chu Fengmian's back when they unleashed their power and prepared to launch a sneak attack on Chu Fengmian. They didn't expect Chu Fengmian to suddenly turn around and attack them with a beam of sword light. Boom! As the sword light slashed out, the power of the stars all over the sky condensed on the tip of the sword. As the sword slashed out, the sword chi turned into an endless river of stars, immediately shrouding the 5 celestial realm experts. The 5 of them were shrouded within the sword chi galaxy. All of them wanted to escape in an instant. However, the sword chi galaxy was so vast that they couldn't see the end of it. At the same time, the countless sword chi within the sword chi galaxy targeted the 5 of them and slashed towards them. In a chapter 2097, among the millions of sword chi in the sword chi galaxy, spiritual swords were faintly hidden. These spiritual swords looked like spiritual swords, but their true form was an extremely sharp sword chi. They were supreme sword chi. The 1,800 supreme sword chis were now all integrated into the sword chi galaxy. Supreme sword chi understood sword techniques and knew how to cooperate with each other. Facing the 5 celestial realm powerhouses, the 1,800 supreme sword chi immediately combined to form a supreme sword formation. Although the supreme sword formation was not a true supreme sword formation and was only in its embryonic form, it still contained the 1,800 strands of supreme sword chi and formed the supreme sword formation. The 1,800 supreme sword formation were all combined into one, turning into a golden spiritual sword. With a swoosh, it rushed into the group of 5 celestial realm powerhouses. The 5 celestial realm powerhouses were now trapped in the sword chi galaxy. They were now standing close together, jointly resisting the bombardment of the sword chi. Suddenly, the golden spiritual sword rushed over. Boom! The golden spiritual sword slashed down viciously, shattering the formation formed by the 5 celestial realm elites in an instant. Not good. Heavenly General Tai Shui, Gate Master Yang, and the others all panicked. They were trapped in the sword chi galaxy. If they joined forces, they could still resist the slashes of the sword chi. But at this time, their joint forces were broken by the sudden appearance of the golden spiritual sword. Countless sword chi slashed towards them, causing them to be flustered. At this time, the 1,800 supreme sword chi that had turned into a golden spiritual sword found its first target. The sword flashed, condensed power, and turned into a sword light that slashed towards Yi Wuchang. Among the 5 of them, Yi Wuchang was the weakest. Before the devouring, Yi Wuchang had fought Chu Fengyan and was severely injured by Chu Fengyan. He had not recovered until now, so he was the weakest. The first target of the supreme sword chi that had turned into a golden spiritual sword was Yi Wuchang. The sword light condensed and slashed towards him at an astonishing speed. Yi Wuchang was still desperately resisting the slashes of the sword chi. He did not see that the golden spiritual sword was already slashing towards him. The sword light flashed, and the sword light pierced through Yi Wuchang's body. Yi Wuchang's body was shattered by the sword chi. His blood was directly devoured by the black hole in the depths of the galaxy. He died on the spot. Yi Wuchang was the first to be killed. Next, it was Sect Master Yang, Tianjiang, Black Tiger Demonic Ancestor, and Zangabuda's turn. In the sword chi galaxy, the 4 of them had no way to escape. They could only endure the bombardment of the sword chi. Even though they were celestial realm experts, they would definitely die today. The golden spiritual sword formed by the supreme sword chi was constantly looking for an opportunity. As long as it found a chance, it would strike and kill with a single strike. Within a few minutes, Zangabuda was the first to succumb to the golden spiritual sword. Next, only Sect Master Yang, Tianjiang, and Black Tiger Demonic Ancestor were left. At the same time, Chu Fengyan did not look at the situation in the sword chi galaxy. Instead, he chased after the 100 Beast Emperor. The 100 Beast Emperor had taken advantage of the 5 celestial realm experts to launch a sneak attack on Chu Fengyan. He had recovered some of his strength and wanted to fight against Chu Fengyan. 1,000 Beast Killing Path. Reverse Stomp. Beast King Immortal. The 100 Beast Emperor roared. In a flash, he launched countless immortal techniques at Chu Fengyan. The 100 Beast Emperor was madly burning his blood in exchange for the power to fight against Chu Fengyan. However, all of his current actions were futile and meaningless. These immortal techniques were even more vulnerable in Chu Fengyan's eyes. Tri-Sun Blazing Sword. The sword in Chu Fengyan's hand moved again. Sword light flashed, and a monstrous sea of fire gathered in the sky. The sea of fire burned the entire sky. All the immortal techniques that fell into the sea of fire were mercilessly burned into nothingness. He's dead. After neutralizing all the immortal techniques, Chu Fengyan shouted. He lifted the sword in his hand. All the flames in the sea of fire flew over and fell into the sword in his hand. Chu Fengmian raised the sword, pointed it at the 100-beast emperor, and slashed down. The 10,000 Zhang sword qi contained pure, yang heavenly fire. It mightily slashed at the 100-beast emperor's body. His body began to melt under the sword qi flames. The body of the 100-beast emperor melted and turned into a pool of blood. Devour the heavens. Seeing this, Chu Fengmian immediately executed the heaven-devouring secret technique to devour the 100-beast emperor's blood. The 100-beast emperor was an immortal warrior. The power contained in his blood was enough to help Chu Fengmian consolidate his cultivation base. The 100-beast emperor's struggles and roars were useless now. His consciousness was completely obliterated by the heaven-devouring secret technique. His blood was turned into Chu Fengmian's power. Too bad he's not an immortal general. Otherwise, his immortal energy would be very useful for me to break through to the celestial realm. Chu Fengmian was still a little polite after devouring the 100-beast emperor. Although the 100-beast emperor's strength had surpassed many immortal generals after sacrificing 2 divine striped tigers, he was still an immortal general. After all, he wasn't a true immortal general. His body hadn't been fully converted into immortal energy. For Chu Fengmian, spiritual energy wasn't very useful anymore. He needed immortal energy to break through to the celestial realm. There were only 2 ways to obtain immortal energy. The first was to refine and devour immortal stones. However, it was difficult for Chu Fengmian to break through to the celestial realm. The resources he needed were 1,000 times, 10,000 times, or even more than that. The number of immortal stones required was astronomical. Even though Chu Fengmian had obtained a lot of immortal stones from the Dark Whale hidden treasury, it wasn't enough for him to break through to the celestial realm. The second way was to devour the blood of an immortal general. Once he stepped into the immortal general realm, he would be able to convert his spiritual energy into immortal energy and complete the final step of transcending into an immortal. The blood of an immortal general contained a lot of immortal energy. Devouring the blood of an immortal general was also a way to accumulate immortal energy. Chapter 298. However, it was extremely difficult to kill an immortal general expert. Although Chu Fengmian had killed the 100-beast emperor today, the 100-beast emperor was only an immortal warrior after all. Even though he had used a secret technique to raise his strength to the immortal general level, he was still not a real immortal general, and his spiritual energy had not been transformed into immortal power. If Chu Fengmian was facing an immortal general expert, he could suppress him even if he used his full strength. However, it would be extremely difficult to kill an immortal general expert. For example, Chu Fengmian had been scheming against the Blood Moon Monarch in the Xianjing secret treasure. He had lured the Blood Moon Monarch into the depths of the Xianjing secret treasure and wanted to kill the Blood Moon Monarch with the help of the Xianjing horn. However, the Blood Moon Monarch had escaped in the end. Immortal generals had many more escape methods than immortal warriors. Although Chu Fengmian could kill the 100-beast Great Emperor today, it didn't mean that Chu Fengmian could really kill immortal generals. However, Chu Fengmian's current strength was definitely at the top of countless immortal generals. There were not many immortal generals and demon immortals who could defeat Chu Fengmian. Even the Blood Moon Monarch at his peak might not be a match for Chu Fengmian now. It's time to settle things over there. After killing the 100-beast emperor, Chu Fengmian looked at the Sword Qi Galaxy. In the Sword Qi Galaxy, Han Yueli and Luo Shi attacked together. With the help of the golden spiritual sword formed by the supreme Sword Qi, they killed all the martial artists in the Sword Qi Galaxy. The Yin-Yang sect master, Heavenly General Tai Shui, and the others could not last more than a few rounds before they were killed one by one. All their essence blood was devoured by the sky-devouring secret technique and turned into pure spiritual energy that poured into Chu Fengmian's body. Thus, the 9 celestial realm experts of the 5 major sects had all died in Chu Fengmian's hand without exception. Below, all the disciples of the 5 major sects stared blankly at the sky. For a moment, many of them couldn't react and were stunned, especially when they saw the invincible patriarchs die in the hands of Chu Fengmian. In the 5 sects, All the experts in the celestial being realm were killed by Chu Fengyan without exception. Run, run. Among the 5 sects, some of the elders who were half a step away from the celestial being realm were the first to come to their senses. They turned into flowing lights and tried to escape from this small world. When Han Yueli and Luo Shi saw this, their eyes turned cold. They gathered their spiritual power and prepared to continue the chase. The 9 celestial realm experts were not the only ones who attacked the Sword Dao sect. All the disciples and elders of the 5 major sects were involved in the attack. Their hands were stained with the blood of the Sword Dao sect's disciples. Han Yueli and Luo Shi would not let these people from the 5 great sects go. Today, all the elders and disciples of the 5 great sects would be let go. There's no need to chase. Today, none of them can escape. Chu Fengyan's mouth turned cold. He suddenly activated the life seal in his hand. Suddenly, a burst of spiritual power shrouded the surroundings of this small world. The spiritual power turned into thick chains. There were tens of millions of chains, each of which penetrated the heaven and earth, completely entangling this small world. The space was solidified. The disciples of the 5 great sects tried to use their escape lights to escape. However, none of them were able to break through the space and were completely trapped within. For a moment, despair filled the hearts of the disciples of the 5 major sections. Many of them were already terrified. They knelt on the ground and begged for mercy from Chu Fengyan. However, Chu Fengyan didn't care about their pleas. He moved and came to the edge of this small world. Looking at the small world below, Chu Fengyan suddenly attacked. His power burst out crazily and shrouded the entire small world. There were thousands of disciples of the 5 major sects in this small world. Chu Fengyan couldn't be bothered to kill them one by one. What he wanted to destroy today was this small world. The moment Chu Fengyan's power shrouded the entire small world, he activated the power of the sky-devouring secret technique to the extreme. A huge vortex shrouded the entire small world. It was going to devour this small world completely. The sky-devouring secret technique had the power to devour everything. It wasn't just a rumor. According to legend, the sky-devouring beast could devour countless celestial domains in a single breath. The small world in front of Chu Fengyan couldn't even be considered a continent. It was just a unique space. Given his strength, it wouldn't be a problem for him to activate the sky-devouring secret technique to devour this small world. Chu Fengyan's eyes revealed a hint of crazed killing intent. As the sky-devouring secret technique was fully activated, all the disciples of the 5 major sects in this small world felt their bodies being shrouded by a wave of power. Bam bam! Some of the weaker disciples of the 5 great sects were unable to withstand the power of the heaven-devouring secret technique. Their bodies suddenly exploded, and countless amounts of essence blood drifted out. The countless amounts of essence blood were devoured by the heaven-devouring secret technique along with the small world. This time, Chu Fengyan wanted to devour this small world directly. All the disciples of the 5 major sects would be devoured along with this small world. Rumble! In the small world, the earth quaked and the mountains swayed. Mountain after mountain, palace after palace. The mountain gate, everything was collapsing. The spiritual spring underground was being pulled out by the sky-devouring secret technique. The entire small world looked like it was the end of the world. Almost in an instant, hundreds of disciples of the 5 major sects were killed by the sky-devouring secret technique. Their essence blood was completely devoured. In less than 3 minutes, there was no one left alive in this small world. Their essence blood was devoured by the sky-devouring secret technique instead of being refined by Chu Fengyan. For Chu Fengyan, the essence blood of these Emperor Realm, Emperor Gu Realm, half-step celestial realm cultivators, and monster gods was meaningless. However, Chu Fengyan didn't waste the essence blood. Instead, he activated the sky-devouring secret technique and integrated the essence blood of all the disciples of the 5 major sects into this small world. This time, Chu Fengyan didn't just want to devour this small world. His real purpose was to integrate this small world into the origin sword world to upgrade it. Chu Fengmian let out a long roar as the heaven-devouring beast's shadow appeared behind him. The heaven-devouring beast's shadow opened its mouth and began to devour the small world together with the heaven-devouring secret skill. First, set a small target. For example, 1 second. Remember, Book Dweller. Chapter 2099. Under the influence of the heaven-devouring secret technique, the pocket dimension began to shrink. It was now even smaller than the origin sword world. However, although the miniature world had shrunk, the space within it was compressed by the power of the heaven-devouring secret technique. The amount of energy it contained wasn't small at all. The spiritual energy contained within the miniature world was simply incredible. Even the current Chu Fengmian didn't dare to devour a miniature world directly. The energy contained within was so strong that it could cause Chu Fengmian to explode. Even a profound heaven realm or celestial realm expert wouldn't be able to withstand the energy of a miniature world, let alone Chu Fengmian. No matter how strong a person was, how could they contend against the energy of heaven and earth? However, the origin sword world could withstand the energy of a miniature world. Only a miniature world could withstand the energy of a miniature world. Of course, an existence like the heaven-devouring beast could devour a miniature world or even a starfield. However, the heaven-devouring beast was an innate divine beast that possessed the power to devour the heavens. Even other innate divine beasts, such as Tianlong and Xianjing, wouldn't dare to devour a miniature world wantonly. This miniature world couldn't even be considered a real world. It was just a prototype, an enormous space carved out of the void. However, this miniature world had always been in the depths of the void, absorbing the power of space and expanding bit by bit. After millions of years, it might truly become independent and become a miniature world, a continent, or even a starfield. Of course, it would take millions of years, or even hundreds of millions of years for that to happen. If he waited until this miniature world truly matured and merged with the origin sword world, the benefits he would receive would increase by tens or even hundreds of times. However, Chu Fengmian didn't have the time to wait for millions of years. Now that the 9 regions were in turmoil, even the 5 great sects had set their sights on the Sword Dao sect. The origin sword world was the foundation of the Sword Dao sect. It could be said that the Sword Dao sect could afford to lose the northern region, but not the origin sword world. The upgrade of the origin sword world was imperative. The current sword origin world was so dangerous that even a Deva realm expert would be able to barge in as they pleased. Chu Fengmian had come to attack the 5 great sects with the intention of using the essence blood of the 5 great sects' disciples to upgrade the sword origin world. However, the discovery of such a small realm was a pleasant surprise. Therefore, Chu Fengmian's plan was to not only use the essence blood of the disciples of the 5 great sects, but also use this small realm to upgrade the origin sword realm. Devouring a small world in order to upgrade a holy land was an extremely extravagant act, even in ancient times. Not many forces would dare to do such a thing. However, Chu Fengmian was ambitious. He wanted to nurture the origin sword into the number 1 sacred ground in the world. When that time came, even if Chu Fengmian wasn't around, the origin sword would still be able to nurture an endless stream of powerhouses to protect the Sword Dao sect. The Holy Land was the foundation of a large sect. 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours. Under the effects of the sky-devouring secret technique, the small realm had shrunk to a size of less than 100 meters. However, at a glance, there were layers upon layers of shadows in this pocket dimension. It looked incomparably illusory. Layers upon layers of space were folded, and the spatial energy was condensed to the extreme. This was already the limit of the small realm's shrinking. Chu Fengmian took a glance and stopped the sky-devouring secret technique with a thought. As soon as the sky-devouring secret technique stopped, the small realm suddenly erupted with spatial power, as if it wanted to return to its original state and break free from Chu Fengmian's grasp. However, at that moment, an incomparably huge dragon claw descended from the sky and grabbed the small realm. No matter how hard the small realm struggled, it couldn't break free from Chu Fengmian's grasp. Let's go back to the sword origin world. Chu Fengmian said to Han Yue and Luo Shi as he squeezed the small world in his dragon claw. Suddenly, his body transformed into the appearance of the ancestor heavenly dragon. Shifting a small realm wasn't easy. The weight of the small realm was simply immeasurable. However, Chu Fengmian had activated primogenitor Tianlong's bloodline and transformed into primogenitor Tianlong, so he was very familiar with the control of spatial power. Although he was in the void, he was as relaxed as if he was taking a stroll in the park. The spatial turbulence didn't affect Chu Fengmian at all. Instead, it helped him. Primogenitor Tianlong shuttled through the depths of the void and soon returned to the vicinity of the sword origin world. In the sword origin world, the attack of the five great sect had made every disciple of the sword Dao sect feel a sense of crisis. Many of them were cultivating in seclusion. Sword Slayer King, Qing Ming, Luo He, and the others were extremely nervous because of the news brought by Chu Fengmian. They didn't stop to rest at all. While managing the various affairs of the Sword Dao sect, they also seized the opportunity to cultivate. Chu Fengmian had left behind a large number of sacred pills, sacred herbs, various mysterious items, and countless resources. As a result, the number of disciples in the Sword Dao sect rose by hundreds and thousands every day. Qing Ming, Luo He, Yin Hanshi, and the others hadn't broken through to the celestial realm yet. However, after devouring a lot of sacred pills, their strength had grown stronger and stronger. They were about to break through to the celestial tribulation. Meanwhile, a turbulent flow of space suddenly appeared in the sky. Many experts in the Sword Dao sect were awakened from their cultivation. They hurriedly walked out of their palaces and looked up at the sky above the Sword Dao sect. What's going on? Why would such a huge spatial turbulence appear all of a sudden? Look, what's that? While countless people were looking up at the sky, they saw a colossal figure that was 3,000 feet long appear in the sky above the sword origin world. That's progenitor Tianlong? That's the appearance of progenitor Tianlong. Luo he couldn't help but exclaim when he saw the figure. He was originally a dragon tortoise. Now that his bloodline had undergone ancestral awakening, he had successfully transformed into a dragon. He was no stranger to the appearance of progenitor Tianlong, the ancestor of all dragons. Enemy invasion? Yin Hanshi, Sword Slayer King, and the others' faces turned pale. They could already feel the terrifying power emanating from progenitor Tianlong. It was 1,000 times, no, 10,000 times more terrifying than the aura of Nine Sons Emperor Wu and Yi Wuchang. Many disciples of the Sword Dao sect were extremely nervous. Don't worry, it's the sect master. Just when the atmosphere was tense, the Mad Dragon Emperor also rushed over. Looking at the ancestor heavenly dragon in the sky, his tone was relaxed. Let's set a small goal first. For example, 1 second. Chapter 2100. Mad Dragon Emperor recognized Chu Fengmian when he saw the appearance of primogenitor Tianlong in the sky. It wasn't the first time he had seen Chu Fengmian in this form, so he recognized Chu Fengmian immediately. Is this the sect master? Sword Slayer King, Luo He, and the others were stunned, as this was the first time they had seen Chu Fengmian transform into primogenitor Tianlong, especially Luo He. She couldn't believe that Chu Fengmian could transform into the primogenitor Tianlong. This was something that the countless experts of the ancient War Dragon clan had never been able to do. Everyone calmed down when they saw that the primogenitor Tianlong in the sky was Chu Fengmian. They weren't panicking anymore, but they were still in a daze. Chu Fengmian came to the edge of the origin sword boundary, but he didn't step into it. Instead, he flew above the origin sword boundary and stood on top of it. What is the sect master planning to do? The Mad Dragon Emperor said, with some surprise. When he saw the 100-meter-sized space in Chu Fengmian's palm, his eyes were filled with shock. He was completely stunned. Others might not be able to see it, but he could see that the space in Chu Fumian's palm was a world of its own. There were many layers of space within it, and if it was released, it would be even bigger than the origin sword boundary. Chu Fumian had actually taken out a miniature world. How could Mad Dragon Emperor not be shocked when he saw Chu Fumian holding a miniature world in his hand like a toy? Everyone, enter the Cloud Feather Palace immediately. Chu Fumian suddenly said when he arrived above the origin sword boundary. His voice reverberated throughout the origin sword boundary, waking up countless disciples who were in seclusion. Upon hearing the voice, all the disciples of the Sword Dao sect flew toward the Cloud Feather Palace without hesitation. Although Chu Fumian didn't explain anything, all the disciples of the Sword Dao sect believed in him unconditionally and listened to him. Swordslayer King, Green Dream, and the others also entered the Cloud Feather Palace. The seal that Chu Fumian left on the Cloud Feather Palace was activated instantly, enveloping the entire Cloud Feather Palace. Mad Dragon Emperor turned into a ray of light and left the origin sword boundary. He came to the void and looked at Chu Fumian from afar. "We can begin now." Chu Fumian nodded as he watched all the disciples of the Sword Dao sect enter the Cloud Feather Palace. Suddenly, he sent the small world in his hand into the origin sword realm. The moment this small world was pushed into the origin sword world, it started to swell. In fact, it even wanted to devour the origin sword world. If two small worlds were to get close to each other, they would devour each other's spatial energy and eventually fuse into one. However, Chu Fumian made the first move before the small world could start devouring. The two spiritual swords in his hands were unsheathed at the same time. In an instant, two sword lights that were tens of thousands of feet long directly struck the small world. Rumble. The moment the 200,000 feet long sword lights entered the small world was shattered into pieces. Space was shattered into pieces. Sword Dao Origin. At the same time, a shocking sword light erupted from Chu Fumian's back. This shocking sword light fused into the origin sword world, causing a huge vortex to appear in the depths of the origin sword world. It was a black hole. This black hole continued to devour the fragmented space. Chu Fumian held the two swords in his hands and shattered the small world again and again. The spatial energy contained in the countless fragmented space was crazily devoured by the origin sword world. Chu Fumian completely shattered this small world and then allowed the origin sword world to devour it, allowing the origin sword world to evolve. This small world was much larger than the origin sword world. Now, it was fused with the blood essence of tens of thousands of disciples of the five great sections. Tens of thousands of disciples of the five great sects were equivalent to tens of thousands of cultivators and monster gods above the Emperor realm. Even Emperor Gu, a half-step heaven realm master, had a lot of blood essence. Now, the blood essence of the disciples of the five great sects and the small world were being devoured by the origin sword world. Such a huge force caused the surrounding void to tremble. The origin sword world was expanding at a speed visible to the naked eye. Is he trying to fuse this small world into the origin sword world to evolve it? Looking at this scene from the side, the Mad Dragon Emperor was extremely shocked in his heart. This was a method that was way beyond his imagination. A holy land could only grow up gradually after going through generations of grooming by the sect. But now, Chu Fumian's method was incomparably brutal. He directly fused this small world and the blood essence of tens of thousands of disciples of the five great sects into the origin sword world to evolve it. However, this move was equivalent to using the accumulated resources of the five great sects to upgrade the origin sword world. The five great sects had already decided to establish themselves in the 9 regions, so they had also brought their elite disciples and countless resources to the origin sword world. Now, all these resources belonged to the origin sword world and were being devoured by it. In a few breaths' time, the origin sword world had already doubled in size. However, compared to the growth of the origin sword world, the growth of its power was even more terrifying. Within the origin sword world, Every mountain and river was undergoing an earth-shattering transformation. Every mountain peak towered into the clouds. The soil on these mountains had a five-colored glass-like appearance that contained incomparably pure spiritual energy. Five-colored living soil. Mad Dragon Emperor was shocked when he saw the transformation of the soil. This five-colored glass-like soil was the living soil, a type of soil that could only be found in the sacred region. The quality of the spiritual herbs and sacred herbs that grew on this living soil could compare to 100. If it grew for 100 years, it would be equivalent to ordinary soil growing for 10,000 years. The living soil was divided into 3, 5, 7, and 9 colors. Now that Chu Fengyan had fused this small world into the origin sword world, the spiritual energy contained in the blood essence of the disciples of the 5 great sects had caused the soil of the origin sword world to evolve. It could be said that if the soil of the origin sword world was completely transformed into living soil, there would be an endless supply of sacred herbs growing in the origin sword world in the future. This would be enough to make the origin sword world self-sufficient. It wasn't just the soil. Now, every drop of water in the rivers of the origin sword world contained incomparably pure spiritual energy. The clouds in the sky and every inch of the mountains and rivers contained incomparably pure spiritual energy. First, he would set a small goal. For example, 1 second. Chapter 2101. Beneath the ground of the origin sword world, an incomparably huge spirit spring was forming. This spirit spring was hundreds of times larger than the one in the sword origin world. In order to start a new business in the 9 domains, the 5 great sects had brought the spirit springs to the 9 domains. There were more than a dozen spirit springs in that small world alone. Every single one of these spirit springs was much larger than the original spirit spring in the origin sword world. Now, that Chu Fengyan had fused this pocket dimension into the origin sword world with his supreme technique, the dozen or so spirit springs within it were also fused into the origin sword world. Beneath the origin sword world, the dozen or so spirit springs gathered and formed a massive spirit spring. An endless stream of spirit energy was released from this spirit spring, causing the spirit energy within the sword origin world to become dozens of times richer. Now, one could casually grab a ball of spirit energy and condense it into a spirit stone in the palm of one's hand. Martialists and Fey celestials who cultivated in the sword origin world were hundreds of times faster than in the 9 domains. If the sword origin world had been a newly transformed sacred land before, then the sword origin world now was comparable to some of the older sects and even the sacred lands of the 7 great sections. The commotion caused by the sword origin world's upgrade was so great that it was very likely to attract the attention of many people. Experts were as common as clouds in the 9 regions. Celestial realm experts and even profound heaven realm experts might exist. Such a holy land would definitely cause countless experts to fight over it. However, Chu Fengyan was already prepared. He had already activated the life seal and completely enveloped the sword origin world and the surrounding void. The commotion caused by the sword origin world's upgrade couldn't be detected by the outside world at all. It was completely sealed. No matter how great the commotion was, it wouldn't be able to break through the seal of the life seal. All right, the sword origin world is about to be completely upgraded. Chu Fengyan stood in the sky above the origin sword world, watching the transformation of the origin sword world below. The miniature world had been completely shattered, turning into fragments of space that were devoured by the origin sword world. The current size of the sword origin world was 3 times larger than before. Furthermore, every river and mountain within it had undergone a transformation. Even a random rock was filled with spiritual energy. If taken out, many cultivators would fight over it. There were treasures everywhere. Only now could the sword origin world be considered a true sacred ground. Cultivating inside, there was an endless supply of spiritual energy. All the warriors and Fey immortals would be able to raise their cultivation realms dozens or even hundreds of times faster than outside. Furthermore, it wasn't just the spiritual energy that had changed. The entire space of the Origin Sword world had become incomparably solid. Chu Fengmian hadn't gone all out to expand the Origin Sword world this time. Otherwise, the Origin Sword world would have expanded dozens of times in size after devouring the essence blood of over 10,000 disciples of the 5 great sections. However, the Origin Sword world had only expanded by 3 times. Even if Chu Fengmian had other plans, the space of the Origin Sword world was being refined over and over again, becoming incomparably solid. At the same time, the origin energy of the Origin Sword world had also increased by hundreds of times. In the past, any Sky Human Realm expert could enter and leave the Origin Sword world as they pleased. This was a hidden danger for the Sword Dao sect. Although Chu Fengmian was powerful, he couldn't be stationed in the Origin Sword world all the time. Therefore, he was mainly upgrading the Origin Sword world this time by using the power of the Origin Sword world itself. The origin source energy of the Sword Origin world had been upgraded. At a glance, one could see a 7-colored cloud shrouding the sky above the Sword Origin world. This 7-colored cloud was the origin source energy of the Sword Origin world. The origin energy of the Origin Sword world was already sufficient to manifest. This 7-colored cloud shrouded the sky above the Origin Sword world and constantly protected it. If any external enemies tried to invade, the Origin Sword world would be able to unleash its power and destroy them. The might of the origin energy of the Origin Sword world was dozens or even hundreds of times stronger than the heavenly star river that had protected the sacred dragon mystic realm. If 1 or 2 sky immortals and demon immortals dared to barge into the Origin Sword world, only death would await them. They would be mercilessly killed by the origin energy of the Origin Sword world. Even if several Sky Human Realm experts joined forces, it would be impossible for them to break through the defenses of the Origin Sword world in a short period of time. In terms of might, the origin energy of the Origin Sword world was comparable to an immortal artifact. It was an immortal artifact that could protect the Origin Sword world at all times. If I barge into the Origin Sword world by force, I won't be able to escape unscathed. The Mad Dragon Emperor also walked over and looked at the upgraded Origin Sword world. When he saw the origin energy above the Origin Sword world, he couldn't help but feel shocked. A sacred land like this was no longer something that ordinary Sky Human Realm experts would dare to encroach upon. The Mad Dragon Emperor was originally an invincible genius of his generation. Due to the hidden injuries of the heaven-defying tribulation, he was stuck at a half-step Sky Human Realm. Later on, Chu Fengmian healed his injuries. After the Mad Dragon Emperor stepped into the Sky Human Realm, his strength increased by leaps and bounds. His accumulation of tens of thousands of years was now fully unleashed. The Mad Dragon Emperor before him had already reached the pinnacle of the Sky Immortal Realm. He could step into the Immortal Warrior Realm at any time. This speed was extremely shocking. However, Chu Fengmian knew that with the Mad Dragon Emperor's talent, if he had chosen to break through the heaven-defying tribulation instead of the heaven-defying tribulation back then, the Mad Dragon Emperor's strength would be far beyond the Sky Immortal Warrior Realm. Given the Mad Dragon Emperor's talent, he could have stepped into the Immortal General Realm within 10,000 years. In fact, it was even possible for him to step into the Mystic Heaven Realm. Now that he had entered the Sky Human Realm after 10,000 years of slumber, the Mad Dragon Emperor's strength increased by leaps and bounds. Right now, he wasn't any weaker than ordinary Immortal Warrior Realm demon immortals. However, even with his current strength, his eyes were filled with dread when he looked at the origin energy above the Origin Sword world. If he was in the Origin Sword world and was killed by the origin energy, he wouldn't be able to escape unscathed. If those Sky Immortal Warrior Realm demon immortals dared to attack the Origin Sword world, they would be courting death. Right now, the defense of the Origin Sword world was no weaker than the defense of some of the Overlord sects in the Grade 2 stellar domains. At the very least, it wasn't inferior to the defense of the Sea Sacrificial sect. Chapter 2102. If there were still people who had designs on the Origin Sword world, the origin energy alone would be enough to force them to retreat. Let's go back. Chu Fengmian fell silent as he watched the transformation of the origin sword world. Then, he took a step forward and stepped into the transformed origin sword world. Within the origin sword world, a large area of land had been transformed into 5 colors growing soil, giving off a sweet fragrance. The plants that were originally growing on the land now contained spiritual energy and were transforming into elixirs. Everything that grew on the 5 colors growing soil, even the most ordinary plants, would become elixirs. The sky was blue, and the rainbow clouds formed by the origin energy of the origin energy of the origin energy of the origin energy of the origin energy were no longer visible. The rainbow clouds had already hidden themselves and wouldn't reveal themselves on normal days. However, they would reveal themselves whenever there was an invasion and mercilessly attack the invaders. Even Sky Realm experts wouldn't dare to enter the origin sword world recklessly. Chu Fengmian opened his empty ring and took out a bunch of seeds of sacred herbs. He casually sprinkled them on the ground. The moment the seeds landed on the 5 colors growing soil, they sprouted quickly and sprouted. Based on his calculations, these sacred herbs would mature in at most a few years. In the outside world, sacred herbs that would take hundreds or even thousands of years to mature could mature in just a few years in the origin sword world. As for some elixirs, they could mature in just a month or two. Moreover, the quality of these elixirs was even better than the elixirs in the outside world. The 5 colors growing soil was constantly absorbing the spiritual energy from the spirit springs. The spiritual energy within the spirit springs would never be depleted. Even so, the consumption of the spirit springs was astronomical. However, the dozen spirit springs that Chu Fengmian had plundered this time were enough to sustain the origin sword world for at least a few hundred years. Sec Master, every time you make a move, you are always so generous. The Sword Slayer King, Green Dream, the Yin Emperor, and the other disciples of the Sword Dao sect walked out of the cloud feather heavenly palace. Looking at the changes in the origin sword world, each of them felt like they were in a dream. If they hadn't witnessed the transformation of the origin sword world with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed that this paradise on earth was the origin sword world. Some of the disciples of the Sword Dao sect sat down on the ground and began to cultivate after sensing the pure spiritual energy in the origin sword world. In just a few breaths, a few of the disciples of the Sword Dao sect suddenly broke through to the next level. Such rich spiritual qi was extremely beneficial even for martial artists and demon gods who were half a step away from the celestial being realm. Even experts in the celestial being realm would feel comfortable in it. Sovereign, what about the 5 great sects? Seeing that Chu Fengmian had returned, the Sword Slayer monarch and Qing Meng walked over and asked. Many disciples of the Sword Dao sect looked at Chu Fengmian. The 5 great sects had always been a huge threat to the Sword Dao sect. There are no more 5 major sects in the world, Chu Fengmian said calmly. Hearing Chu Fengmian's casual words, everyone's face was filled with shock. These 5 great sects were annihilated by Chu Fengmian just like that? Hearing Chu Fengmian's relaxed tone, it was as simple as crushing a few ants. All right, the damn 5 great sects are finally annihilated. Many disciples of the Sword Dao sect cheered. Previously, when the 5 great sects attacked the northern region, half of the disciples of the Sword Dao sect died in the hands of the 5 great sections. Now that they heard that the 5 great sects were annihilated, the disciples of the Sword Dao sect were extremely excited. The Sword Slayer monarch, Heluo, Qing Meng, and the others also showed some relief on their faces. The stone that had been weighing on their hearts was finally removed. However, Chu Fengmian knew that the 5 great sects were nothing compared to the countless forces in the 9 regions. Not to mention the giants like the Alliance of 100 Extreme Star Regions, some sects in the 2nd Grade Star Regions, such as the Oceanic Sacrifice sect, were far superior to the 5 great sections. Moreover, 2nd Grade Star Regions were nothing. The 3 Great Saint Regions were the truly terrifying ones. The scene of a spatial crack suddenly opening in the dark whale, hidden treasure, and hundreds of celestial being experts pouring out of it was still vivid in Chu Fengyan's mind. Any one of the three sacred realms had hundreds of celestial realm experts, and some even had profound heaven realm experts. The current sword origin world was still too weak. Qing Ming, Luo He, Emperor Yin, and Yin Hanshi, the four of you are only one step away from the celestial being realm. It is the true fortune of the Sword Dao sect that you have stepped into the celestial being realm. Chu Fengyan looked at Qing Ming and the others and said, the four of them were now at the peak of the half-step celestial being realm. Now that Chu Fengyan had brought a large number of sane elixirs, it was enough to support them to break through to the celestial being realm. Now, in the Sword Dao sect, there were only three celestial being experts, Han Yueli, Luo Shi, and Mad Dragon Emperor, excluding Chu Fengyan. This number was still too few. If Qing Ming and the others also stepped into the celestial being realm, then the Sword Dao sect would have 7 celestial being experts. In this way, even some forces from the extraterritorial star regions would not dare to provoke the Sword Dao sect. If you don't step into the celestial being realm, you are indeed insignificant. Only those in the celestial being realm can be considered experts. We are planning to go into seclusion to break through to the celestial being realm, Qing Ming said. She already had the idea of breaking through to the celestial being realm. In the Daluo star regions, half-step celestial being realm experts were invincible. As for the celestial being realm, it was an illusory existence. But now, the upheaval of the 9 regions had attracted experts from hundreds and thousands of star regions to the 9 regions. Even the number of celestial being realm experts in the 9 regions was not small. Their half-step celestial being realm experts were simply insignificant. In front of a true celestial being realm expert, they were nothing. This time, the attack of the 5 major sects had made them feel a sense of crisis. Each of them had made up their minds to go into seclusion to break through to the celestial being realm. During this time, the matters of the Sword Dao sect will be handled by the Sword Slayer King. Chu Fengyan said, in a few days, I will leave the Sword Dao sect, but I will still be in the 9 regions. If there is anything, you can directly send a message to me. Chu Fengyan instructed. Calculating the time, Prince Xia and the others should have already left the 100 Extremes Star Regions Alliance for the 9 regions. In a few days, they would arrive at the 9 regions. Prince Xia was just a small figure and was not worthy of Chu Fengyan's attention. However, Chu Fengyan still wanted to use him to lure out the Tiansheng Jindi behind him. Chu Fengyan was determined to get the Supreme Sword Qi in Tiansheng Jindi's hands. Moreover, Chu Fengyan was also somewhat interested in the small world that Tiansheng Jindi had talked about with the martial ghost ancestor. First, he set a small goal, such as 1 second. Remember, Bookhouse, you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.